Good evening. It is 6 o'clock, and at this time I'd like to call the Caroline County Board of Supervisors meeting to order. We will begin with invocation led by Mr. Black, followed by Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand.
Heavenly Father, as we come here and gather tonight, we ask you to look over all of us to make sure that we do the best for Caroline County. We also ask you that you keep those in the path of the hurricane safe, and all of those soldiers overseas that are serving us to keep our freedom safe as well. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. At this time, we'll have opening board comments. Mr. Thomas, do you have any comments to get us started this morning?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do have just a couple of brief comments. One is there's a deacon who's at Oxford Mount Zion Baptist Church, and they'll be celebrating their 150th anniversary next month. I think it's November 4th, so it's between now and our next board meeting. And they didn't get me the church history in time to prepare a resolution. So I'm going to ask the chair's indulgence if I get that to Mr. Parton, if she would be able to sign a resolution between now and then. I'd appreciate it. I thought the sheriff was going to be here. I spoke to him Saturday, but we have on our agenda later the school resource officer grant. And I know we're going to talk about this later, but in the Saturday newspaper article that announced the grant, there was discussion of an incident that took place in April where it was reported it took 12 minutes for a deputy to arrive. When I spoke to the sheriff, he said that wasn't the case, but that's what was reported. And I'd like us to create some sort of board process and procedure, more than likely in closed session, because there are certain confidential requirements, but there should be some procedure where the sheriff could brief the board so at least we would know what really happened in case citizens asked us, without names, of course. And the sheriff said he was kind of amenable to that, so as long as it's in closed meeting and there's no names. And the last thing I have is I had the pleasure of attending, along with Mr. Wilson, the ribbon cutting at the county's first urgent care facility last Saturday, which was at Belmont. And this is a great Mattaponi and county success story. It highlights the transportation needs we have there, the need for our fire station there, and the expansion of Germanna, McKesson, and MC Dean. And I have a question for Mr. Fincham about signage, because that should be an exception to the normal signs that we have on the road. That's a life-saving facility, so it may need a bigger sign. And I was supposed to ask Chief Loftus to look at the back of the urgent care facility to make sure they had a ramp suitable for our rescue squad vehicles. So if we could do that, I'd appreciate it. That's it, Madam Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Black.
Yeah, just actually only have one. The emergency entrance that will connect Crump Drive to Lake Landor, to Durrett Road, they've started construction on that. I actually went by that today, so that'll be really important for the citizens inside Lake Landor. So we will have some sort of ribbon cutting ceremony when that entrance is completed. That's all, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Seeley, do you have anything?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just one. I would just like to say welcome to the new pastor at Shiloh Baptist Church, though he's been there a few months. He was installed here on Saturday. 152 years of history, and I'd just like to welcome Pastor Dr. Craig Beasley for Shiloh Baptist Church as their newest pastor.
Thank you, Mr. Seeley. Mr. Underwood, do you have any comments?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Today I spoke with Pastor Good of the Mount Salem Baptist Church, and He is the director of the Cancer Care Ministry for Caroline County, and they're having a program on Sunday, October 28th. That consortium of churches includes Reedy, Mount Salem, Mount Ona, Jerusalem, Shiloh here in Bowling Green, Shiloh in Ashland, and Mount Table. He's asking us to write a resolution for them for the work that they do with the American Cancer Society, and they are doing some training to be part of the National Certified American Cancer Society organization. So I told them to send us the information, and we put a resolution together for their program on October 28th. That's all I have, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Forehand, do you have anything?
Two items. One, received a resolution from Lake Caroline Property Owners Association, specifically seeking the county to investigate options for turn lanes in front of their facility. They specifically cite the growth of the neighborhood from just a couple hundred homes to over 1,200, and the ongoing troubles that they have with traffic accessing Lake Caroline Drive. So we'll be making a request. I'll make a request to the DOT representative, VDOT representative, to do a study for that entrance to see what our options are with the current status. Second item, myself and the family attended the state fair. We had, I believe, 10 days of outstanding weather. I don't know whether that's a record or not, but it was a great event, well laid out. My family, as usual, had a great time, and looking forward to hearing, getting the final results on that, on attendance. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Forehand. Yeah, I also attended the fair on the hottest day of the fair, and it was really hot. But we had a good time, and I also was there a couple of other times assisting a club with their booth, and it did look like there was a good turnout. So we were just thankful for that. I also just wanted to mention, everybody keep watching on the newspapers. We've got a lot of fall festivals going on. We've got the Harvest Festival coming up. We've got Special Olympic soccer events. We've just got Frog Level coming up, a lot. So please be careful when you are out at these events. Watch out for pedestrians, and please watch out for our law enforcement as they're trying to direct traffic and keep people safe. We don't need any more bridges named after law officers because somebody got careless. So go, enjoy, have a great time, but please be alert at all times. And with that, Mr. Forehand, I will say that your comment about the request to VDOT is timely because one of our presentations tonight is from VDOT, so you'll have a captive audience. He's late.
Stuck in traffic?
So we'll just put him on later. Oh, hey, Dennis, there he is. Okay. So let's move on to amendments to the agenda. I know we've had 2 requests for additional resolutions. Can we, if it's all right with the board, can we put that under the consent agenda I for the 2 new
It's
requests?
2 resolutions. Do you want to list them
resolutions.
separately?
Okay.
Because that would make, right.
So I and J under consent.
So we would have a resolution for Oxford Mount Zion's 150th anniversary
And for the Cancer
And your-
Society? Caroline County Cancer Ministries. Okay. And if we need cancer care. And gentlemen, if it's approved on the agenda, please get the information to staff as soon as possible since we need it by a short time period. All right.
Are we
And
going to
we
add-
also have the proposed amendment for the additional parking at the Dawn
Yes.
Library. Put this under new business. And put that maybe down under 10A.
Is that something that's going to require a lot of discussion, or shouldn't that be, or could it be consent agenda?
Well, there's two options.
There's money involved.
Okay.
Is there anything else? All right, do I hear a motion that the agenda be accepted as amended?
So moved, Madam Chair.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? So moved. We are now at presentations. VDOT is delayed at a...
No, they're right here.
That's right, they're here. I've got my notes here. I'm just reading my notes. Sorry, Kyle. So, come on up, and we are glad to see a new face.
All
VDOT
right.
back.
Well, thank you for having me. Again, my name is Kyle Bates. I'm the Assistant Residency Administrator in the Fredericksburg Residency. I was afraid I was going to be late. I had a Spotsylvania board meeting at 4:30, and 5:30 rolled around, and I still hadn't gone, so I left. So here I am. Yeah, good choice, right? All right, so just to run through some of the updates I have, I'll go ahead and start with the construction projects. Which we only have one, which is going to be Route 629 Monarchy Road. We are still on schedule to have that road prepped and resurfaced with surface treatment by winter. That is still on schedule. If we have some more weather, we may have to push that back, but I'm still pushing strong that we can get that done before winter. As far as preliminary engineering, we have the Route 639 widening from 2 lanes to 4 lanes. That design is ongoing. The public hearing was held in April of 2018, and we're looking for right-of-way to begin in 2019. That is going to be advertised in late of 2021, and construction is looking to start in 2022. We have the Route 639 Charlesburg safety improvements. We're currently at 30% under review for the project plans, and the project is looking to be advertised in 2021, and that was a smart scale project. Route 666 Rixey Road, this is another rural rustic surface treatment road that we're looking to get done. We're looking to have construction go forward in 2020. With Caroline Village, these are rural additions, so we're going to bring those into the state system. Design is currently underway for Mason, I believe Julian and Kennedy Street. Again, these are going to be surface treatment, and this project is going to start in 2019, being next year. To go through some of the other various things that we've been working on, Mr. Black, I know we had met out there at County Line Church. We reached out to the USDA, and they got the rights of entry, last I had heard. I do not think that they have gone out there and actually removed the beaver dams yet. That was one of the main issues out there. We're still waiting to hear back from them. We called them again today. As soon as I hear something, I'll let you know, though. But that's still on tag. We haven't closed the road due to flooding since we met out there. So I think a lot of it was just attributed to the excess amount of rain that you all know we've all had this year. I was looking at some rainfall totals the other day, and our average over the last few months is usually about 3 to 4 inches, and we've gotten upwards of 9 inches on 2 occasions in a given month. So Mr. Seeley, I know you and I had talked a little bit about Route 2 and the slurry seal out there. That was a preventative maintenance treatment. I sent an email out back in, I guess it was August, to a lot of the constituents that had concerns, and I think a lot of them were pleased with the information. I didn't hear anything else after that email. I didn't get any phone calls, and my information was put out there to all of them, so I haven't heard anything negative since then. And this slurry treatment, a lot of the times, it takes some time to kind of compact into the roadway. I mean, I just rode it on the way here, and it seems to ride pretty nicely. So. Mr. Underwood, we had the drainage request on our Reedy Mill. We're looking to actually perform that work next week. I'm sorry, this week. That work was, this road was, I think there's a project back in the 70s that may have realigned some of the roadway. It's been like that literally since the 70s. There was a constituent that you had that had complained about water coming off of the road, but water's coming off of everywhere in that area. It is in the low point. So what we were going to try and do is build a berm on the back side of the ditch, try and hold some of that water. Not going to hold all of it. The reality is that the water's going to flow to the low point. It's been that way since, like I said, the 70s. So, Mr. Forehand, I have no new updates for you. If you've got anything for me, when we go around, feel free. Mrs. Long, Port Royal District. So I know we had talked about some drainage concerns in the rural acres. We've had crews open up those pipes. That work is now complete. So that's all said and done. And then we also had the Portabago Bay. We went ahead and sent our patching contractor in there to do some spray injection patching. These are not long-term patches, but they will hold it over until we can get to a point where we are looking to add this to a resurfacing schedule, hopefully in the near future. We're currently looking at our 2020 routes. And we have very similar funding to what we had in the previous years. But we're looking hopefully in 2020 or 2021, pending funding to get that subdivision included in maybe a Cape Seal or a surface treatment contract. Mr. Thomas, we've met out there on Healy Street a couple times, I think. So it sounds like we've got a good plan in regards to the drainage that in the curve there. I think we've committed to cleaning out that easement. So as soon as I think the county we're going to work hand in hand with you all, and as soon as y'all have a scheduled date, just let me know, and we'll make it happen. So those are all the updates I got. The Fredericksburg Residency has hired a resident engineer or residency administrator, so she will start. She's coming from Dahlgren. She's looking to start in late October. So.
Wait, you mean a new resident?
Yes, sir.
So you're not going to be the new resident engineer?
No, sir, I'm not.
I was just thinking you were doing such a good job, you wouldn't last long, and
Yeah.
it's like one meeting.
We
Well-
didn't complain, when we thought you were going to stay.
Well, I'm not
Okay.
planning on going anywhere. That being said, I'm still the assistant residency administrator, and I have been for the last 3 to 5 years. I've been doing a lot of work behind the scenes when Sean's here. Sean says hi, by the way. That being said, I have no plans to go anywhere, and you all feel free to continue to reach out to me if you have any questions or concerns. So.
Madam Chair, can I ask a question or two,
Yes,
please?
Mr. Thomas. go ahead.
It's Kyle, the Route 2, excuse me, Mr. Bates, the Route 2
Yes, sir.
ceiling, I think I called you and personally said I had some issues with my eyesight and the fact that we didn't have reflectors anymore.
Mhm.
I was by there the other day and there's still no reflectors. Are we going to put those reflectors back?
The reflectors absolutely should be back. They were there before. They should be back. If they're not, we'll follow up on
They're
that.
not back. Mr. Seeley, I'm sure you
No,
have.
yeah, I was looking for them myself because
Okay.
we've had that same conversation and said they were coming back once the new thermal lines were put down. So I'm hoping that.
Absolutely.
So if you could get your contractor to do it, I think we'd really appreciate that.
Absolutely.
And again, like you said, we are working with Mr. Fincham and I are working with the landowners behind Healy Street to make sure we can get the water off from there. So we'll let you know as soon as that's possible. And last but not least, is it possible at all for the county to participate in any of the design on 639? Or is it just the VDOT design?
In regards to the
Well,
design of the roadway,
We're not going to design the roadway at all. I mean, that's your job. With respect to the fact that you want a solid median there, we've got some businesses there that would be impacted drastically by a median. So I was just wondering if you had any.
There was a public hearing on that.
correct.
And that was a couple months ago, and that was an opportunity for people to come out and voice their concerns.
Yeah, we
And
had
I think
the-
some of those, they took those into account at the public hearing. That was well advertised, and there was probably, I don't know, what do you think, Mr. Forehand? I don't know, there was quite a few people at that public hearing that VDOT had. They were coming through. Yeah, I mean, it was quite a few.
And most of them wanted to talk about the median being solid or not, or they agreed?
A lot of them were, like, there was just some concerns by certain businesses about, but VDOT said that they would, obviously, that they would keep they wrote down concerns, public concerns, and then VDOT said that they would take those into account.
Okay, I've been here before when VDOT said they take those into account, so my question still stands. Is
So-
there any possibility the county could participate in the final design of that?
So what I can do is I can run that back to my preliminary engineering team. I was not at the public hearing that you're talking about, but I can tell you where we're at with design and where that falls and what we're looking at moving forward, and I can absolutely include you all in those conversations. Some of those things being for operational purposes, we definitely are going to have to move forward on, but there may be some leeway to,
Just if you can consider the impact of
Absolutely.
businesses there that may or may not survive once the median's put up. Thank you, sir.
Mr. Black, did you have any questions for Mr. Brown?
Yeah, speaking about that just brought up something. Speaking about the 639 project, Mr. Forehand and I had talked about, we had wanted to make sure that when people got off on 639 that it aesthetically looked pleasing, and we were supposed to meet, and then Sean, sometime in the late summer, and then Sean got changed over. We were supposed to have some sort of meeting, I think, in the county offices as far as what VDOT had come up with, some sort of plan, what plants and so forth. They had someone that, what they would do to make it look
Right.
nice and welcoming when people got off the exit. And so we haven't had that meeting.
Right.
And that's pretty important because that's kind of for a lot of our major neighborhoods are right off that exit.
Absolutely.
So it's the one where a lot of people, most people are probably going to see.
Yeah, when we get those landscaping plans together, and I'll have to go back and check and see where we're at with that, but absolutely, you all will be involved in that process, because at the end of the day, I think the county was looking to maintain a lot of that landscaping moving forward.
Right.
For the most part, VDOT, we try not to put those things in the meeting because that's a lot more work on us, and we've got plenty of other things going on with mowing on the secondaries, primaries, things like that. So absolutely, we want to include you all in that process. So as soon as I get those plans, I'll include members of the board, and we can go from there.
And-
Okay.
And just to be clear, we're not looking for no changes to right-of-ways or the width of the roads. It's just strictly this conversation is
Right.
aesthetics. Is it
Understood.
stamped concrete
Yep.
versus brushed concrete? Is it the rolled curb, the
Yep.
type of trees?
Absolutely.
Things like that.
All aesthetics.
Yep.
Yeah, we want to get that. And the other thing too is, if you could send me the contact information from the guy gentleman from USDA, as far as I'd like to reach out to him too.
Okay.
I mean, I understand what you said, we haven't had the torrential rains, but we had torrential rains last spring or the spring before, and it flooded as well. That road has shut down historically a couple times a year, and it doesn't take necessarily 9 inches. It may be 2 inches in a short period of time, and it's closed down for a short period of time, but it's still dangerous with people hydroplaning. So if we can do anything to get that fixed, I would definitely appreciate it. And I do appreciate you coming out for that, but that is there's a problem a couple times a year on that road.
Absolutely, and they've committed to doing the work. It's just a matter of where we're at on their
Right.
on their priority
Okay.
list, because I believe there's one guy
Right.
that does our entire area. So.
Okay. The other thing too our staff has done a really good job actually, the curb and gutters on Ladysmith Road. Can you just make sure that those, whatever you guys can do to make sure that those are maintained as well? I mean, our staff has been cleaning them up too. But up on Route 1, going north, I'm not sure if it's, pretty sure it's still Mr. Forehand's district. There's a tree growing out of one of the drainage. We had that problem on Ladysmith Road. There's a tree growing up out of one of the drainage on the right where the curb is. So you've got a tree growing there, so you might want to.
This was Route 1.
Route 1 north on the basically it would be on the east side of Route 1. There's actually a tree coming up out of I don't know what you call it, but yeah, there's a
The curb and gutter there.
yeah drained, yes. So if you have the crew go out there and look for it, it's pretty obvious when you go by it.
Yep.
And I think that's it for me for now. Thank you.
Does anyone else have any questions? Mr. Seeley?
I'll let Mr. Underwood go. I'm looking for a road name.
All right, Mr. Underwood, then we'll go back to Mr. Seeley.
Mr. Bates, how are you this evening?
Good. How about yourself?
I'm doing well. I think you know what my issue is the flooding on the road. Those ditches haven't been pulled for quite a while, and I think a number of my constituents have called without response, and that kind of concerns me that they say they have not gotten a response.
Yeah, absolutely. It's concerning to me too. I'd be interested, if you have some of these constituents, I'd be interested to speak with them directly and find out exactly where that went wrong in the process. Because we stand behind our our online system, that's the best way for us to track our work and plan our
Right.
work. And if that's failing, then I need to have a serious conversation with some of our.
They'll be here at 7:30. That's
Awesome.
public comment. Thank you.
Mr. Sealy, are you ready yet, or you want me to keep moving?
Keep moving.
Mr. Forehand.
Still looking. I'm close.
Welcome, Mr. Bates.
Thank you.
A few items. One of my opening comments was we received a resolution from the Lake Caroline Property Owners Association regarding a traffic study for the Lake Caroline Drive and Route 1. I believe that Mr. Nelson performed like a 24-hour one not long ago. It was during the middle of the week. However, most of their issues are weekend heavy because of the overflow traffic from 95 and the additional traffic going in and out of Lake Caroline. Ultimately, the goal we would like to see some options for turn lanes. It's not a new issue, so there's probably a very large file somewhere in the office on some preliminary work done on it, but we'd like to keep it to the front of the file cabinet and look at it again to see if we can put some legs on that, maybe even if it's down the road some years, but want to keep it on the radar. Next item, Durrett Road. It was paved this last summer. The road construction signs are still up towards the school, on the school
Okay.
end. And a sincere thank you from the Lake Caroline folks regarding the refreshed signage for watch for turning vehicles on Route 1, both going north and south. They look good. Looks like they're a couple feet closer to the right-of-way or to the roadway, so that's positive. And then in your preliminary engineering report, it says limited access modification approved. Do you know what was requested and what got approved regarding that?
I get, that's very similar to what he was saying. I think I can get that information for you
Okay.
all and let you know.
I was just surprised to see it. And then lastly, the Lake Caroline Transportation Committee was seeking either your attendance or one of your colleagues on the evening of the 24th or the 25th of this month, if you have any availability.
This was Lake Caroline, you said,
Yes, sir.
on the 24th? Okay,
And
is there
they
a
have-
contact there that you can work with?
I can, you can go through me if you'd
Okay.
like.
Fantastic.
But I can give you a contact right after this if you'd like as well. They have some questions, concerns, comments. They want to take your temperature to see where you are with with some of the questions that they have, and go both ways and let you know what their problems are and how maybe you can help them and vice versa. So,
Right. Okay.
other than that, thank you very much.
Mr. Sealy?
Well, I'm going to try to describe, I had a USDA permit that we were waiting for. It was down off of 600 at the lower part, almost to the King William County line. That there were actually a road, and there's another road before that there's a swamp between them, and the beavers were in there. Talked to Sean back in April or May about actually they were waiting for the USDA permit to
Right.
get the beavers out and then fix those drainage pipes. And I just can, for the life of me, not remember the name of the road.
It's Route 600? there?
It's off of
Route
600. It's down by the 600 store. You take a right.
Okay.
When I get home, I can look at the emails because I had email and pictures, but I was just curious if we've made any. Edgar Road.
Edgar. All right.
Edgar Road, that is it. I knew it was, but I didn't know if we'd ever finished that or where we were in the scheme of that.
Right.
It sort of fell off the list when Sean left.
All right, let me look into it, and Sean's only a phone call away.
Oh,
and
no, I
I'm sure
know.
I've got something in my email too, so let me look into it and I can let you know.
That'd be great. Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome, Mr. Sealy. Thank you so much for being here. I had a list of things to ask you about, but you've already touched on all of them. So I'll just be tickled to death to get Monarchy finished off before the cold weather, so those citizens start sliding around on the mud and the snow. So if you keep pushing that, look forward to the new speed signs down in Port Royal. That was a nice surprise. So if there are no other questions from anyone, the only suggestion I have is with requests for some information on how designs are coming along. Maybe at some time we could just have a little work session and you can
Yeah.
sort of fill any interested members of the board in on what the, where they stand right now for
Absolutely.
that road.
Absolutely.
Ms. Long, I have one more thing that I just remembered.
Yes, Mr. Black?
Mr. Bates, as far as the Childsburg, or I call it Childsburg project out in Childsburg, the Ladysmith Road, we had talked about possibly doing either kind of a public hearing. When would that be?
The public hearing, we'd have to get through with the design first before we really start. We have to at least have something to go off, some kind of conceptual plans,
Okay.
things like that.
Do you have
So,
an estimation of time?
I don't off the top of my head, but I can find out. I'll let you know.
Yeah, okay, thank you. That's it.
Thank you, Mr. Black. Thank you. And my other question is, are you going back to Spotsylvania now?
No. They missed me.
Well, you
Sorry.
have a good evening, and thank you so much for being here.
No problem. You all have a good one. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Shebel.
Mr. Bates, I'll meet you. I'm going to give you this information right now.
Madam Chair, members of the board, good evening.
Good evening.
This agenda item is to review the wastewater master plan. Approximately a year ago, staff came to the board and asked for you to approve a task contract with Dewberry to update our water master plan. In it was a review of our current system. It also developed a system model for flows. We developed a growth module and a demand projections. And then we also have put in there future projects as well as upgrades that are necessary. We didn't spend a whole lot of time on our wastewater treatment plant, as we have just recently upgraded that to a 1.5 MGD facility, and it'll easily go to 3 million gallons a day. However, it was looked at, but did a very high elevation on that. And then we also looked at reuse. Each of you should have, for your reading pleasure when you get home, the wastewater master plan. Inside of that, on the cover, is a technical memo, about 10 pages, really gives you the nuts and bolts of the entire plan. With that, we have Brett Heim with Dewberry with us this evening. He's going to present an overview to you through the PowerPoint, and I'd like to have him come forth now.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I appreciate your time this evening. I'll try and keep this brief and provide a high-level overview of the work that we've been performing for about the last year. So like Mr. Shebel said, we have completed the wastewater master plan for the county. About a year ago, we performed the water master plan, and so this is kind of the counterpart to that. As Mr. Shebel said, my name is Brett Heim. I am a professional engineer and project manager with Dewberry Engineers out of Glen Allen, Virginia. Just a high-level overview of what we did. We kind of centered around what we wanted to achieve, and that was done with conversations with county personnel. We took a look at the existing system. We performed a computer model, a hydraulic model of the existing system, and then based on future growth projections, we extrapolated the existing system to potential projects that would be needed to accommodate future growth throughout the county. In addition to that, we took a look at the wastewater treatment plant, as well, where we evaluated the current nutrient permitted nutrient levels and what the future levels would be required. All of that we provided in this lovely book in front of you guys for you guys to read. And so again, the plan and purpose of this master plan is to develop a roadmap for wastewater improvements. It's to identify capacity needs, timing, and location of future projects based on the growth within the county. And it's a communication document that can be used to reach out to citizens to plan for economic growth and development. And it also provides fee estimates for these capital improvement projects. Again, this is just a high-level project objective and scope of what we did. We collected data from the county. We developed demand projections with the assistance of the county. We plugged that into our computer model to model the existing system. We modeled the hydraulic capacity. This is the ability to receive additional volumes of wastewater flow, as well as the treatment capacity at the treatment plant. And then we consolidated this into the master plan report in front of you. So the existing system, as most of you know, is centered in the southern portion of the county near the Ladysmith and Carmel Church exits off of 95. Flows from these two portions of the county or from the Ladysmith portion of the county is conveyed through what we call the VDOT sewage pump station, which is in the center of the screen there. That pumps to a gravity system, which then flows by gravity to the existing county wastewater treatment plant off of Rogers Clark Boulevard. There's 6 existing wastewater pump stations in the central system, and then 2 that are operated by the county but are not owned by the county, that pump flows outside of the town of Bowling Green, and it pumps them to the Bowling Green wastewater treatment plant. In addition, you have the State Fair system, which, as you know, pumps wastewater flows to the Doswell wastewater treatment plant in Hanover County, and you have the Dawn neighborhood system as well. So we evaluated each of these systems. This provides, and I apologize, the text is a little small on the screen. I wasn't prepared for it to be so far away from me. But we looked at each of the capacities of these systems and what they average out currently. And so on average, the poorhouse or the high school system is about 11,000 gallons per day. The central system is about 340,000 gallons per day. And those are obviously treat flow at the wastewater treatment plant. As part of this project, we performed a condition assessment of the 8 county-operated pump stations. We visited each pump station, we identified potential improvements, we categorized them as high, medium, and low severity, and we developed cost estimates for improvements. This was one of the more important steps of the project to make sure that the existing infrastructure is adequate for conveying flows to the wastewater treatment plant. Our findings were that in general, the system is in good shape. For the current capacities that it is pumping. There was one pump station that needed site improvements, but other than that, they appear to be in good working condition. Part of the hydraulics of this report was a system hydraulic model. This provided a capacity analysis of the existing system and also provided us a roadmap to evaluate the future capacity of the expanded system based on future growth projections. So within that, we looked specifically at the wastewater pump stations. The Department of Environmental Quality regulations state that you need to maintain a flow between 2 feet per second and 8 feet per second through force mains. That was consistent with what our findings were. In addition, you can see here that the modeled flow is in blue, and the actual flow of the pump station, the modeled flow is in red, and the actual flow of the pump stations, or the rated capacity of the pump stations, is in blue. In several of these locations, you can see that the modeled flow is approaching the capacity of the pump station. This confirmed, anecdotal evidence from the county staff that these pump stations were indeed close to capacity. However, given the current growth in these areas, we didn't see an imminent need to upgrade them. However, there are provisions within the master plan that do recommend improvements to these pump stations to expand their capacity. The other thing we did was look at the gravity system. So this is the full system, and I know it's hard to read on the screen. I assure you that the pages in the report are much more legible. But on the screen there, the dashed lines represent the pumped pipes throughout the system, which we call force mains, and the solid lines represent the gravity systems. Anything that you see in green represents locations with significant available capacity, meaning that not in the foreseeable future we don't anticipate them needing to be upgraded. The one area that we did see that had lower available capacity was near the Carmel Church area, and we provided and recommended a project that would increase that gravity sewer system's available capacity. Additionally, we took future demand projections. This was based on the county's comprehensive plan as well as plan developments. We sat down and had several workshops with several of the county officials to look at where there were future growth opportunities, and we incorporated these as wastewater demands in our model to anticipate future wastewater infrastructure needs. The two main drivers of this future demand system revolved around the potential for a transit-oriented development, or what we call TOD. And so we evaluated two scenarios, one with them including the transit-oriented development and one with them excluding it from the model. And so again, these were kind of the two primary drivers of the future systems model. And within these two, there were two options. One of them, what we are calling the pump station option, would increase the existing VDOT pump station's capacity. However, that option essentially was a complete rebuild of the pump station as well as the force main associated with that pump station. Ultimately, we selected what we're calling the Polecat Gravity Sewer Interceptor. This was our recommendation in the report. The main drivers for this was that a gravity sewer system requires significant less operations and maintenance funding, as well as energy costs, because you're not pumping the system, you're letting gravity do the work. So that was the primary reason why this was selected. The capital cost under the non-TOD option was slightly higher, but we anticipate that with the life cycle cost and not having to maintain another pump station, that there would be significant cost savings long term. So two options came out of this. Again, as I like to say, the non-TOD option and the TOD option, that's the transit-oriented development. Under this option, as you can see, the solid red line through the middle of the county parallels Polecat Creek. That would convey flow from the Ladysmith area, wastewater flows from the Ladysmith area down to the existing wastewater treatment plant. Under this option, the only other significant major project that would need to be conducted to allow this to work properly would be a rerouting of one of your existing pump stations near the Econo Lodge, or what we're calling the Econo Lodge sewage pump station, which is near Carmel Church. And that would utilize an existing force main. So these were the two primary drivers, or this was one of two primary options. Again, this is the non-TOD option, or transit-oriented development. Under the TOD option, it is anticipated that there would be a large transit-oriented development near the Carmel Church area. In this case, there would need to be two large gravity sewer interceptors as part of the future expansion of the system. And you can see the existing one there, which at the north part of the page, which shows the Polecat Creek, similar to the last one. It shows the Polecat Creek interceptor. The difference here is that there would also be a secondary gravity sewer line that would go from the Carmel Church area to the existing wastewater treatment facility to convey flows from the Carmel Church area. So that kind of summarizes the capacity issues that the county is facing in the future, or challenges that they're facing in the future. The other thing that we took a look at was the existing wastewater treatment plant. The current capacity of the wastewater treatment plant is 1.5 million gallons per day. However, this is limited based on an EPA-driven, what they call the Chesapeake Bay Total Maximum Daily Load. And in 2005, the EPA capped wastewater treatment facilities throughout the Chesapeake Bay watershed at a certain level of nutrient requirements. In this case, the county's nutrient load allocations are 3 milligrams per liter nitrogen and 0.2 milligrams per liter phosphorus. And essentially what that means is that you are permitted for these two nutrients, they must be removed to that level up to only 1 million gallons per day. So as you can see here, the current permitted capacity of the treatment facility is 1 million gallons per day. Under the TOD option, there would need to be an offset beyond the 1 million gallons per day. If the future growth of the transit-oriented development occurs, you would need to offset approximately 6 million gallons per day. Under the non-TOD option, you would need to offset approximately 3 million gallons per day. Obviously, this represents a significant challenge. However, part of what we looked at was the potential to how could we offset these nutrients. And part of that is purchasing credits. Additional options are what we looked at were a reclaimed water system. And essentially, under this reclaimed water system, which is included in the master plan, it completely removes nutrients from the discharge of the wastewater facility. So reclaimed water is wastewater that is treated to a high level of quality, and it is returned to an end-use customer who can make use of it in its current state. So two of the large end users that this was planned around were a potential future data center near the Carmel Church area, as well as the Mattaponi Golf Course. Yes, sir.
Isn't that supposed to be Pendleton Golf Course since there's no water at Mattaponi? Joey? There's no public water at Mattaponi Golf Course.
This would be, yes, sir, this would be a new piped system out to the Mattaponi Golf Course. Yep. And then I'll show you that here on the next figure here. So it was planned around two large end users, as well as the transit-oriented development. And this there was two phases that we centered this around. One was an extension to the Carmel Church area, as this is where that data center was located, and one was extended towards the Mattaponi Golf Course with an option to go to the transit-oriented development. And obviously, this would all be driven by future growth. So here is kind of the... Yes, sir.
Question. If you'll go back a couple of slides, you show a new route right there.
Yes, sir.
The red line, the upper one, is a new route. Is that not true?
That is our recommendation, yes.
It would have to be put in.
Yes, sir.
What is your date recommendation for that?
As soon as future growth would require it.
No.
It collects
Right.
flow from the VDOT behind the VDOT rest area and conveys flow to the wastewater treatment
Do you know how many
facility.
miles that is?
I don't know off the top of my head. I think it's roughly 6 miles.
Right. I was just curious, just a thought. Is there any, could we add purple pipe to that line when it was done?
That would certainly be a possibility. One of the difficulties and challenges with purple pipe systems, it's very hard to retrofit existing systems for reclaimed water. So unless there was an anticipated large end user in that area, it might not make sense financially.
Could we water crops with it?
There is that option. I believe that there are certain regulations that govern what those crops can then be used for. I don't know the exact particulars of those regulations, but there are requirements that about what level of treatment would be required at the treatment facility, and then where they would be, what would they be able to use for.
One last question is, are there businesses that look, and this is a question I guess for Mr. Wilson, are there businesses that look for that existing purple pipe? And would there be, and this isn't a question we're going to solve tonight, but is there an advantage to thinking about actually installing that simultaneously with the ability to advertise along that route at some point that you could actually have that available? I mean, I'm just looking down the road. What would the cost be, and can it be laid simultaneously?
There would be significant cost savings if you were to lay both of them. What they are, I cannot say, but obviously if it's already dug up, it's a lot easier to put two pipes in than it is to dig it a second time.
That's what I was going to ask. Can they be in this? They cannot be in the same trench.
They need to be separated by 10 feet, I believe, horizontal feet.
Okay, thank you.
There is a vertical offset requirement, but if you maintain the 10 feet horizontal, you don't need the vertical offset.
Right.
All right,
Just a
gentlemen.
thought.
Thank you. Please continue. Thank you.
I'm happy to answer any questions as you guys have them. I appreciate the questions. I find this stuff interesting. I don't know if everyone does. Okay, so going back to our kind of skeletonized version of this reclaimed water master plan, and obviously this would be growth dependent. However, so what you see in purple there is the Phase 1, which would extend out towards Carmel Church. Part of this would meet the needs and demands of a future data center and potentially if the transit-oriented development as well. The second phase, and we did not associate a timeline to these because really it's growth-driven. The second phase would be out towards the Mattaponi Golf Course, which you can see in the red about midway up the map. So again, the main point that I would like to drive across tonight is that a lot of what is in this report is growth-driven. And so this plan provides a timeline and an overview of what projects could be required if some of these growth projections are realized. So it establishes timing by phase, it establishes the budget and the purpose for each project. And again, these are recommended projects on a very high level of planning. And we would recommend that if these projects are seen as a need in order to accommodate growth, that there be a proper preliminary engineering report and design conducted and completed for each project prior to implementation. I believe that is all that I have. Oh, there's a cost associated with this is excluding the TOD. And I really apologize for, you really can't read that at all. I can't anyways from back here. This is included in the report. It's in the executive summary as well as the overview memorandum. At the bottom there, you can see the summary of the total costs under each phase. Again, these were utilizing growth projections that were fairly conservative. With that, if you guys have any additional questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Those were conservative numbers? Well, I put my glasses on. The first one was 29 million.
That was for that gravity sewer interceptor that was the 6 miles long. That would be a very high cost project. But again, it's growth dependent. If there is growth, if the growth is realized, then we would recommend that project. But essentially, we show that in the 2018 column because we would recommend it as soon as the growth warrants it.
All right.
So yeah, I can understand how that number would be alarming since that is this year.
And without my glasses, it's 29 million, 5 million, 6 million, 14 million, and 8 million. I was trying to that was conservative. So there are some rather large numbers associated with the project.
Yes, sir. In the planning period, if you can read it at the top there, the planning period is 2018, 2023, and then from there it jumps into 10-year intervals.
Okay. So I'm talking 33 million in the next 5 years.
If the growth warrants it, yes, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sheeple.
I'd like to just add one note of clarification. Underneath of the current DEQ allocations for nitrogen and phosphorus, our wastewater treatment plant is considered beyond state-of-the-art. State-of-the-art can treat to 1 million gallons a day. Because our facility is considered beyond state-of-the-art, there is no defined capacity of what it can actually treat to. Our engineers have designed it to treat to 1.5 MGD, and now that we've been running it for 7 years, we have no doubt that we would be able to meet the 1.5 MGD under our current allocations for nitrogen and phosphorus.
Thank you. All right, if there's no other questions, thank you very much for a nice report. We appreciate it.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Our next presentation now is from VITA, the 911 service deployment, next generation. Do we have someone here for that?
Madam Chair, he just stepped out to the restroom. He'll be right
All
back.
right, thank you, Scott. Let's move on to appointments and come back to that presentation. Do we have an appointment for the Building Code Board of Appeals for Reedy Church or Bowling Green?
Madam Chairman, I'd like to appoint Ms. Addie Terrell. She's already serving on the Board of Zoning Appeals. And says she's willing to continue to serve, so.
Thank you, Mr. Underwood.
Thank you.
And I'd like to reappoint Mr. Craig Woodward, who has also agreed to continue.
Thank you, Mr.
And I'll make that a motion for both.
Yes, please.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? So moved. How about Economic Development Authority, Madison District?
Pam, anyone reached out to him regarding? Okay, I'll have to.
All right,
Have
we
that
will
for next
move
meeting.
that over to our next meeting. Planning Commission, Mattapani, Mr. Thomas.
Mr. Minor has expressed his willingness to serve again another term, so I'd make a motion to appoint him.
I have a motion. Do I have a second? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? So moved. All right. Okay. Can we move on to the consent agenda? Are there any changes, any questions on the consent agenda? Hearing none, do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Do I have a
Second.
second? I have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? So moved. So at this point, we're going to go back to presentations and invite our representative from VITA up to explain to us Next Generation 911. Thank you very much for coming out this evening.
It is my pleasure to get out of Richmond. Good evening. My name is Steve Marzoff. I'm the Integrated Services Program Director from VITA. And I understand that at your last meeting you had some discussion about Next Generation 911 and had some questions about the deployment in Virginia. So I'm here to answer those questions. If you'd like, I can start with a brief introduction, if you'd like.
Yes, please.
Sure.
If you could
Sure.
start at the beginning and bring us up. Thank
Sure.
you.
So the 911 system we have in Virginia today has been in service for roughly 30 to 40 years, depending on when the jurisdictions deployed it. It is based on analog technology. It's voice circuits and has almost no ability to transfer or transmit data into the 911 center. The ability that we do have is limited to just text, and we can receive about 512 characters of data, and that's it. Now, this network isn't unique to 911. It's also not unique to Virginia. It's the nationwide issue that 911 does not have the ability to process data from these devices that we all carry with us every day. So we started looking about 10 years ago at what its replacement is. And the 911 Services Board developed a comprehensive plan about 3 years ago, and earlier this year in January approved a deployment plan that talked about how we're going to roll out what we're calling Next Generation 911. And essentially all that is converting the network to an IP-based or Internet Protocol-based network or a digital network that allows us to be able to transmit data and voice together as a single package into the 911 center. And it opens up an entire new ability to receive data. It will in the future, not initially, allow us to do things like video or photos and that sort of thing. But initially we need it because the current network that's out there that Verizon and CenturyLink support throughout Virginia is being decommissioned. It's going away. They're not investing in that infrastructure any longer. So we need to start looking now at how we're going to make that transition. So part of that deployment plan over the last 2 years, the 911 Services Board funded a project up in Northern Virginia to actually deploy the first Next Generation 911 network in Virginia. Fairfax County went out and did a competitive procurement. They had 5 total bids. They ended up selecting AT&T as their service provider. My staff participated in that procurement as non-voting members. It was a very competitive process and was competitively awarded. So as a result, we recommended to the 911 Services Board that they recommend as part of their deployment plan the deployment of AT&T in jurisdictions. Now in Virginia, 911 is a local service. It always will be, always has been and always will be. So it's ultimately a local decision. But what we discovered is none of the localities out of Northern Virginia, outside of Northern Virginia, really had an opportunity to do that competitive procurement. So what we came up with was an idea of creating what we're calling migration proposals for each of the 119 911 centers in Virginia to say, if the locality wants to deploy that AT&T solution covered by the Fairfax County contract, this is what it would look like. This is what it will cost, and this is what level of funding is available through the 911 Services Board to do that. And recently we delivered those migration proposals to all 119 911 centers throughout Virginia. Now, that brings us to a point where each locality needs to make a decision. The decision is to whether or not they want to go ahead and forward with the AT&T solution, which is fine, they can. And if they do, they make a funding request to the 911 Services Board. The 911 Services Board approves it, and then they would be deployed. Or they can decide to do their own procurement if they'd like, issue their own RFP, go out and do the competitive procurement process for themselves. I will tell you that Virginia Beach has indicated that they intend to do that. They told us about 2 weeks ago that they expect that the RFP will be out the middle of this month, which is next week. So we expect to see it next week. Or some localities have said, well, we only have really one offer on the table from AT&T. Some localities have decided they want to wait and see what happens in Virginia Beach and maybe look at that as well. And if that gets awarded to a different contractor, then we would come back and do a second migration proposal for that solution, because the migration proposal ultimately becomes your funding request to the 911 Services Board. Now, the 911 Services Board, which I will point out, 16 members, 8 of which are local government, including a fire chief, police chief, sheriff, emergency medical, a finance officer, and 3 911 center managers. They're the ones that decide what level of funding, and they have, as part of their funding guidelines, essentially said, we will pay for the entire transitional cost from what you are today to next generation 911, regardless of which solution you select, and I'll put a little asterisk next to it. Nobody gets a blank check, so it's ultimately going to have to be reasonable and be an appropriate use of the Commonwealth citizens' money. But with that caveat, they will pay for that entire transition cost. Now, one of the things we've discovered through this migration proposal process just recently, in the last 2 or 3 months, is the monthly recurring cost for this next generation 911 system of the future is, for most localities, more costly than 911 was historically. So you do see a lot of jurisdictions are seeing increases. Now, under the AT&T contract with Fairfax, there are 12 localities in Virginia that see a decrease. And they tend to be ones that have a high number of landline phones now compared to their population. The best example is City of Richmond, where 60,000 state employees come every day. We have desk phones that Richmond pays for, but we don't count for their population because I go home to Hanover County every day. So as a result, City of Richmond's one that will see actually a cost savings. But most communities, especially small communities, will see an increase because the way Verizon did pricing for 911 in the past was based on how many wireline phones you had. And I have to tell you, I was asked recently, because we thought it was going to be about a wash between old and new, and it's not. It is a significant increase for some, and how did we get it wrong was the question. And the answer is, we were really surprised how little some localities are paying for 911 today. In some communities, they're paying $300, $400, $500 a month for 911 today with Verizon or CenturyLink. And with the next generation 911, you have to pay for redundant IP circuits and minimum cost, you're looking at $3,000 to $4,000 a month. So as a result, some communities will see an increase. Now, to offset that, the 911 Services Board is going to provide that delta, whatever that increase is. Whatever you pay today, you will continue to pay for 24 months after you deploy. And then at the end of that 24 months, the entire cost would be your responsibility. So we're trying to blunt that increase and at least give you at least 2 years. In some cases, they'll have longer because they don't deploy for a year or two, so they may have 3 or 4 years to plan.
Is that 24 months from the time we actually enter into a contract?
No, it's 24 months from the time you to go live, because you don't start paying AT&T a dime until the day you go live. As soon as you go live, the way the contract in Fairfax was structured was as a services contract.
Right.
So they come in, they install, they do all that. It doesn't cost you anything. The day they flip the switch, that's when the cost from AT&T kicks in.
So if we wait for this Virginia Beach RFP, do we still have 24 months from the time they...
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the same would be true of the Virginia Beach contract. If you were to go with whatever, and I will say, we do expect a similar competitive process down there. It could end up going to AT&T.
Yeah.
It could just be a second contract with AT&T.
Yeah, and then it'll be the same thing.
But,
Okay.
But absolutely. It's 24 months from when you deploy the service. So, and start paying that monthly recurring cost.
And according to the legislation, I was trying to check before, 2023 is the last implementation timeframe.
Correct. When we went for legislative change last year to put in
Right.
for Next Generation 911, it was actually Verizon who pushed for the July 1st, 2023 date to be added because they didn't want this to drag out forever during this transition.
Well, now that you mentioned Verizon,
Yes, sir.
Mr. Thomas, could we let him finish his
So-
I thought he was done.
presentation and then go through?
I'm
you
happy
done?
to take, happy to take questions,
Okay,
absolutely.
continue then, Mr.
Please.
Thomas.
okay, I mean, why is it that Verizon is actually saying, and why are they allowed to say, they're going to get out of the landline 911 business?
So Verizon actually isn't, let me say it this way, it's not Verizon who's getting out of the business as much as it is the business that's just going away. The analog phone service that's out there is diminishing, we are not able to serve the citizens on the network that we are. It's an analog network that can't do data, and things like text to 911 is something that the hearing impaired community is desperately asking 911 to deploy. We can't really do that effectively on the current landline phone. Some communities do it through a backdoor way, but it's not integrated. So we need to make this change for 911. Verizon has decided they don't want to be a prime contractor in Next Generation 911. They did participate in the Fairfax procurement, partnered with, I believe it was General Dynamics. They just lost the bid.
Okay. Now Mr. Marzoff, I understand the technical nature of VITA, and when you go back, say hello to Dana Smith for me.
I will.
I've known her for a long time. But it seems like the State Corporation Commission would say Verizon as a utility should deploy fiber to localities, and since they are a local provider and they have that monopoly, that's where the issue is. It's I understand when you came here, you're just procurement, technology, which I wouldn't even be concerned about if Verizon hadn't said, I'm moving away from this.
So again, and we do work closely with the State Corporation Commission and have on this project. They're aware of the plans moving forward, and I can't speak for the State Corporation Commission. I will point out that though I work for VITA, my background's public safety. I'm 30 years. I was a firefighter, ran Prince William County's 911 Center for 11 years, and took the job as a state 911 person 18 years ago now. But I don't think the State Corporation Commission is allowing Verizon to stop doing 911. Verizon will continue to do 911 until the last 911 center goes away. But the new infrastructure, being IP-based, from my understanding, isn't within the domain of the State Corporation Commission. The State Corporation Commission regulates the landline phone service. And Verizon, what we're talking about here is a migration to IP and to the internet, as it were. So again, I can find out for you and get back to you about where the rules are for the State Corporation Commission to regulate that versus the landline telephone service. But my understanding has always been there is a difference between those two.
But you would at least appreciate and empathize with the frustration of local governments, and especially rural governments, who don't have access to Verizon's fiber network, and then hear them say, we're no longer going to support, an analog system which is copper-based.
So I will say for this particular project, for Next Generation 911, because AT&T, which we're talking about AT&T, the telephone company, not AT&T Wireless, who's doing this, they don't have that fiber infrastructure within Virginia to get the last mile to every 911 center. So as a result, if you look in your migration proposal, the diagram that's there is a Verizon diagram. So they are partnering with Verizon, and Verizon will be installing, and I'd have to look back at the picture, they will have to install, right here it is.
See, but that's kind of the rub. While you look for that, coming out of my house is only one copper wire. That one copper wire, if I dial locally, goes to Verizon switch. If I dial a 1 and an area code, it goes to AT&T switch. I've said this before. My mother used to get checks from all of the different bells. I understand how that works. The reality is, AT&T, whoever the phone company is, or whatever we want to call them, they're not allowing fiber in rural localities. So now I'm stuck.
And
And that's why I say the state corporation should should regulate a monopoly in that sense. And I know it's not you, you just happen to be at the podium. But I need to get that out so people can understand that, and they may not understand that in Richmond, but we feel that pain every day.
I can understand the concern, and I'll be happy to take back to our contacts at the State Corporation Commission Communications Division that concern, but you're right that there's not much we can, within the 911 program, do about it. I mean, ultimately, and this is one of the challenges that we've had, is ultimately we respond to what the citizens buy. Back in the days when it was just landline, it was easy, but now we have wireless, we have voice over IP like Vonage and companies like that, and we even have hybrids where somebody's using a wireless phone using IP to use those services. And they expect that 911 can just handle it. And we're at the point the network can't handle it anymore, and that's why we need to do this.
Well, let me piggyback on Mr. Thomas's comments a little bit, because the integration of all this, I love the sentence in the Vita book where it says that we can actually, I wrote it down, we can actually piggyback their lessons learned. They haven't implemented this yet. There aren't any lessons learned. I do a lot of high-end integration for the Navy. I can tell you that integrating all this, I have folks whose landlines don't always work that live where there is no cell phone coverage. When I say next generation 911 to them, they look at me like I'm insane. They don't even have internet, and their phones don't work all the time. So I'm back to Mr. Thomas's comment. Here we are with the State Corporations Commission saying, you can let this go away. But the integration of all this, one of my concerns is when you say you're going to pay total cost. I've asked from the Sheriff's Office what consoles we have and what software we're running. Do you have that with you guys tonight? Are you aware of what we're running and what we have?
Yes, sir.
So you're going to guarantee if we have to upgrade consoles at $100,000 a piece, 5 of them, plus the $367,000 of the cost it's going to cost us, that Vita's going to cover all that. Is that what you're telling me tonight?
No, sir.
Because that's what I heard.
No, sir, because there is a cost to, there is a basic cost to run a 911 center, regardless of whether we do next generation 911.
We just spent $6.2 million on a Motorola radio system that came with all the 911 consoles, 5 of them, the whole 9 yards. And we were supposed to be set. Now, we got out of the UHF frequencies. Half of the country is still in them.
Mm-hmm.
So the 911 system, the E911 system that we're all currently on today, what do you think the odds are that they're going to all transition by 2023?
I'll guarantee it.
Then they'll have no 911 system is what you're telling me, correct? If they don't transition, they won't have 911.
I'm not sure I understand.
If you dropped the E911 system in 2023, Verizon says January 1st, 2023, we're done. What then happens January 2nd?
So there will be no dropping of 911 if somebody hasn't, if for some unforeseen reason I'm wrong, and by February or July 1st or July 2nd of 2023, everybody has not converted off the current E911 network. It will still exist July 2nd. There's no way we can turn off 911. But my guarantee is we will have every of the 119 911 centers in Virginia, every single one of them will be off the current E911 network and on the next generation 911 long before July 1st, 2023.
But you're telling me...
Technically, that's what he's saying.
Well, I understand what he's saying, but what I'm saying to you is we've spent $6.2 million 3 years ago.
Yes, sir.
For a brand new radio system for
Yes, sir.
Motorola. I'll bet we have north of $100,000. What is the cost of each of the 911 consoles we have? No, I want to know the consoles. How much was the console for 911? We have 5 of them. How much were they a piece? Okay, so roughly $50,000 a piece.
Yes.
So if we have to replace those, is Vita going to fund us replacing those?
Okay. Your question mixes multiple systems.
Well, no.
So-
let me take you through, because I do integration.
So-
I'm going
so
to
no,
tell
let me-
you that the process is you're going to bring something to this desk. We then have to make it work from that desk to the operator.
No, sir. Please allow me to explain.
You're going to make it work.
So there are multiple systems within in a 911 center we refer to as a PSAP, if I slip and use that term instead, Public
Okay.
Safety Answering Point. There are multiple systems, probably 6 different systems. While they do integrate to some level, we know how they integrate. The console system that you refer to, a console system does not integrally tie to the 911 network in any way. There is a piece of equipment within the console, which is in your case, Motorola Vesta system, which I believe your version 4.3 of the Vesta system that you have in there right now. Now, in order to do next generation 911, that will need to be upgraded, and absolutely that Vesta 4.3 upgrade will be covered by VITA. Now, when it comes time to replace that system, it will be more, I think Chief Deputy just said that it was $210,000, and if you buy that again at $210,000, VITA or the 911 Services Board will contribute $150,000, as we always have, to equipment replacements. Now, if you decide to do it with a neighboring jurisdiction and do a joint system, it would be $200,000. That's the way the funding has always been for 911 and will continue to be, and I'm fairly certain you got a grant the last time from VITA and the 911 Services Board to do that. So that relationship, that grant relationship. So we're not going to come in, and the main reason, let me explain, is if we have a philosophy of you do for one, you do for all. So if I come in and say I will pay 100% of whatever it costs you to replace that piece of equipment, I have to do it for Fairfax too, and theirs is $2.5 million, and that will blow the budget very quickly. So we do have limits for that equipment replacement. Your radio system, though, does not tie in any way. That $6.5 million investment you made is still a good investment that will not be impacted by the transition to next generation 911.
But to some degree, Steve, this is the analogy that we feel. The Sheriff's Department goes out each year and buys new Dodge Chargers. Mm-hmm. Dodge says next year, in 2 years, we're no longer going to support the Dodge Chargers. Mm-hmm. That's kind of the way we feel now. And it's not you again. You know, I like you, I like VITA. I wish you were Verizon standing here in front of us so we could really say how we feel. But that's the real issue. You know, and I don't know what VITA can do to help us with that issue.
So I can tell you after...
They've said they're not going to support these Dodge Chargers we just bought. Scott's got 42 of them out there on the highway now. And in 2 years, they're no longer going to support Dodge Chargers. Does that analogy sound right to you?
Absolutely. I've been doing this in 911 for 32 years. I can tell you how many times I've gotten the letter of end of life from Motorola or from its predecessors and companies. It happens.
You got one of those from PeopleSoft, too. I remember.
I've gotten numbers of them. In fact, we just got one yesterday from, I don't think you use Geocom's map, but Geocom has over 50 implementations in Virginia, and they sent out well, we're not going to support that version anymore, but hey, we got this brand new version we'd like you to buy, and they'd like us to provide funding for it. So absolutely, there is a planned obsolescence in almost everything nowadays, that whenever you buy something, a computer-aided dispatch system, we don't provide any funding for computer-aided dispatch, and it looks like you have version... Next page. It's always on the page you don't pick. You have the Interact CAD system, and that will at some point become obsolete and will need to be replaced. And I can't help you with that. That's technology. It advances and it changes, and there is that ownership cost of those things. I can guarantee you that your radio system will not be impacted, that the primary thing that's impacted is what we call your call handling equipment. That's your Vesta, Motorola Vesta 4.3. We know that backwards and forward and inside and out, and we absolutely will provide whatever it takes to make that compatible for next generation.
One of my real concerns was also at our last board meeting, we were told that there was a grant program. Phase 1 was already passed. Phase 2 was supposed to end 1 October, and when we got here, it was pushed to 1 November. In Phase 3, yet we were for the first time as a board member hearing about we had to go to next generation 911, and we all sat here in kind of awe, like, okay, how long does everyone else know this? Fairfax has already put out an RFP, got a proposal back, evaluated, and selected somebody, and we're grappling with missing Phase 2 of the grant program. Basically telling us we needed to make a decision before January 2019.
So I apologize for confusion on that. This is a change in the way we've done grants. We used to do grants that October 1st was the deadline for the grant, And we still have a small grant. We call it the PSAP Education Program, or PEP. So the Sheriff's Office can get $2,000 in grant funding to do education, and that's still available. October 1st was the deadline for it. But for the Next Generation 911 in this specific migration proposal, the board just this year changed what we're calling a rolling submission. Basically, 45 days before every board meeting, there is a deadline. So the first one was September 17th. That passed. The board, we had 12 submissions for that, and they will be considered by the board at their meeting on November 8th. It's the second Thursday in November. There will be another deadline for the board's January meeting. I may be off a day, but it's like November 26th. Then there'll be one in the end of January for the board's March meeting. There'll be one end of March for the May meeting. There'll be one end of May for the July meeting, and so forth. You can submit before any one of those deadlines to have your funding requests considered.
But we were led to believe we had to make a decision that night, as our staff was. So I guess my confusion is when did the real discussion, I saw the legislation, I saw when it was voted on, I see who's on the 911 board, but when did the urgency of we have to be out of this or we have to be onto some vehicle by January 2019 emerge? Because that is still not clear to me, with us being handed this at our last board meeting going, you got to make a decision. I'm looking for who gets notified and how long has this been going on and what is the notification process for it?
So the 911 Services Board passed their deployment plan in January of this year. Before that, we had a series of town hall meetings. All localities were invited. We had webinars shared with a VML and VACO in, I'd say, April timeframe that they advertised for participate. And then these migration proposals started, well, we started another set of town hall meetings in March of this year. I mean, we've been trying to do outreach. It is one of those things when you have such a diverse state, 10 hours from end to end or point to point.
Correct.
And I know because I've driven it back and forth, it is difficult to get everyone, but this is the period of time right now when we want to be out doing this type of education. So I apologize if our message got skewed. Now that we've delivered these migration proposals, we have a lot of localities who really want to move forward. So I think that's created this sense of urgency of people wanting to decide. And one thing I should point out, as independent as Caroline County is, and you will make your own decision as to what you want to do, you cannot do this alone. There is a catch to the funding that the 911 Services Board is providing, and I'll explain why. And that's about schedule and timing. The issue is there is a residual cost. If you were to migrate off of Next Generation 911 today, there is a residual cost that goes to Verizon because we still have to support both networks. Essentially, they have to split your calls with your neighbor before they go to AT&T. We can't just switch it over to AT&T because the telephone network doesn't follow those boundaries between localities that we created many, many years ago. So as a result, there is a residual cost. Now, for some localities, that's small, a few $100s a month. The largest, of course, is Fairfax. It's about $50,000 a month. So the 911 service, it's roughly throughout the Virginia for a 6-month period will be about $2 million to this transition cost. Now, the 911 Services Board has agreed to pay that, but it's on the condition that there's some schedule that we can live with where, and it's by, the current 911 system has 2 switches that everybody's connected to. You happen to be connected to Stewart and Chester, the one in Chester and Richmond, city of Richmond. Your neighbors, King George County, is connected to Winchester, Fredericksburg. So you're right on the line between the two. But there are 32 localities or 911 centers that are served by that selective router pair. We need all 32 to go within a 6-month block to control that residual cost. So that also has caused in the 911 community a sense of urgency that people are saying, hey, City of Richmond wants to go. They want to move. We have other localities. Powhatan County actually signed on with AT&T before they got their migration proposal, before they knew what level of funding they were going to get. We've had a lot of interest in this, but as a Commonwealth, we're going to have to be able to manage this so that we keep the costs down. Now, once all 32 go, and we're not on those 2 switches provided by Verizon anymore, that cost goes away, so we don't have to worry about it. But that is the Herculean task that my staff and the board is under, trying to coordinate 119 PSAPs to go a direction. You don't have to choose AT&T. You don't have to deploy AT&T during that 6 months, but we need people to be looking at that 6-month block. Now, if it goes 8 months, 9 months, not the end of the world, but we can't let it drag out till 2023 because we just can't afford it. We'll waste all of our money on residual cost.
Steve, can I ask you one last question for me? We have real issues with cell service in the county. Is there anything in part of this transition to next gen that VITA will help support us with new towers and things of that nature?
No, sir.
So I'm gonna transition my whole system over tomorrow to next gen, and I got half of my county has bad cell reception. What do I do?
There's nothing that we can do on that side of the equation. I mean, it's the same with broadband. You mentioned broadband coverage, not having broadband. It's the same issue. We're picking it up from what we're calling the originating service provider, which is the Verizons or the wireless carriers or the Vonages or whomever of the world. We're getting it from them into the 911 center. How it got to them, that's beyond our control.
But I've got a farmer in Sparta who fell off his tractor. Now, he can get somebody to run into the house today and call on the landline for 911. But after I make the switch to next gen, he's going to just be laying out in the field.
Or he'll still be able to call from his landline. Landline will still connect into next gen.
Let me follow up on that, because to me this sounds like a slippery slope. We make this transition, Verizon's out of the 911 business. What keeps them in the landline business? Because I've already got people complaining about landlines. So what holds their feet to the fire on maintaining landlines and not just saying, we're done?
That would be a question for the Corporation Commission. It's beyond mine.
Well, but no, you're right. It's a question for the State Corporation Commission, but it's also a question of all the services that they provide. And we're letting one pull out. We're letting E911 go, and you're trying to actually expedite that by getting us all to agree that in a 6-month window we'll transition, which I'm back to my first comment. I'm not sure I see us moving in that direction with what shoe falls next, because nobody's got that answer.
So, sir, I would respectfully disagree that Verizon's looking to pull out of this service. We need to move 911 off of the current network. It is antiquated. It cannot process data. There is a wealth of location data. There's a wealth of health information. There's a wealth of data that's available to 911 Center. We have no ability to process it whatsoever.
Wealth of health data?
There are apps for people's phone that you can put in information. There's a service called 911 Plus that's available that people can subscribe to.
There's an EKG thing.
Oh, yeah, I know that, but I mean, you're going to send that to the 911 center now?
As the hub of information out to the responders. The 911 center wouldn't use it, but to the responding units, to the people who can actually use the data, absolutely. And again, we're not talking about that.
But now you're on my radio. Now you're back on my radio system again. So we're back to where I started from, is that it is going to have an impact.
Only if you choose for it to have an impact. Right now, we have no ability to do it whatsoever. What we're trying to do is build the infrastructure to be able to do it.
Can I please, I have a simple question about the deployment of this. Both Mr. Black and I serve on a regional commission, George Washington Regional Commission, serves 5 counties in a city.
Yes.
I think maybe I've missed one meeting in 4 years. Never heard it, never had a presentation. You all really should think about, instead of spending 5 nights going to 5 counties, doing a presentation regionally, or the Go Virginia study groups, or do this that way, because no one, neither Mr. Black or I, had heard of it in a regional study. And that really sort of surprised me that a government-funded, supported regional study group was never informed on this. So that is just a suggestion.
I appreciate that suggestion.
I think it would keep the sticker shock down a little bit if we all knew it was coming and understood it a little bit. And as everybody on this board can tell you, I have trouble doing emails, so this is all way over my head. I'm a pen and paper person. But But I understand we need to get the information out there and that life is changing, but it's an important decision for us as a board to make. And so when you say 6 months, that's really scary to me because government moves slow because we're spending, yeah, we're spending other people's money and we've got people's welfare in mind. So are you saying we need to make a decision in 6 months?
So the deployment from the first that goes, from the first locality that deploys until the last that deploys of those 32 on the same network that you're on needs to be within 6 months. Now, whether that 6 months is June 2019 to December 2019, or whether it's January 2021 to June of 2021, is ultimately going to be decided by that region, by what they do, what they decide.
And you're going to get a list of the 32 other areas that we would need to cooperate with or use in some way to us, so we know
We
who
would
we're
be
dealing
happy
with?
we'd be happy to provide that. We have had 3, I believe it is, regional meetings of that group so far over the last probably year and a half to talk about the deployment. Again, with the 911 center level folks, not decision makers. And you know, we tried to do outreach and coordinate, but you brought up a group that we hadn't considered using the planning groups, and that's something that we can definitely reach out to. Actually, I met the woman from them at the King George meeting just Tuesday or so ago, and she gave me her card, so we will reach out to them.
Thank you. And
So
Mr.
who's
Forehand,
invited to-
Mr. Forehand's next, please.
Just to piggyback, those are already established organizations that do reach every jurisdiction in the state. So just,
Understand, and we do know of and it is a PDC, a Planning District Commission?
yes.
Yeah. We do know the Planning District Commissions. I think there's 22 of them, and we have reached out from them from time to time, more so on the GIS side than the 911 side, just because they tend to have more involvement on the GIS side. We had been coordinating with VML and VACO and the Sheriff's Association and the police chiefs and others, but we will definitely reach out to them.
My question is specific towards funding, because I pay with my new landline and several cellular services. There's a 911 charge, a E911 charge on every bill.
Yes.
Without fail.
Yes.
Is all of that funding going to you, or is the state skimming that? There's an issue with that nationwide? Do we have that issue in Virginia?
We do not have that issue in Virginia. We are not on the Federal Communication Commission diversion list, as they call it. Virginia is not. So that's a little bit complicated, but the Reader's Digest, 50,000 foot, and I'll drill down if you like, is on the wire line side, there's 75 cents. That actually comes back to you through the telecommunications trust. There's a formula, the Department of Taxation collects the 5% sales and use tax on all communications, plus the wire line 911 goes into the trust and then gets distributed out to localities based on a formula that was set, I believe it was in 2006. I think it's been adjusted a few times, but that comes to you as general funds. The wireless 75-cent surcharge does come to me, and I thank you for your contribution.
Okay. Would you anticipate those fees going up as this is rolled out?
So our current budget, after we finish all the migration proposals, is roughly $53 million over the next 4 years, and there is sufficient funds within that revenue to do it. The only issue that we have is we would like to be able to the diversity cost, which is putting in diverse fiber into every 911 center, is a bit costly in some areas. In yours, I think it was only about $80,000. One of your neighbors towards the south, a little more, Matthews County, is about $1.8 million in order to provide that, because they don't have, we have to lay about 6 miles worth of fiber in order to get them that connection. In fact, Fredericksburg is almost $1 million because we have to cross a river and the interstate in order to get it in, and it's not that long, but it's really tough terrain for them to be able to do it. So in order to be able to do all that before deployment, which is the optimal, we would need to have some borrowing authority to be able to borrow the money up front, do it, and then repay the money later. So we're working on that in this General Assembly session. But right now, we have sufficient funds to do this project. When I was in Southwest Virginia, their biggest concern was that we'd start and run out of money about Roanoke and not finish. And I made the commitment, we won't start unless we know we can finish. So we're sticking with that commitment.
Mr. Underwood?
Thank you.
Just one question. You said the conversation started in January regarding this?
That was when the deployment plan was approved by the board.
Approved. But as my colleague asked the question, where did the notices go to? Who was notified regarding the plan?
So the town hall meetings that we had in fall of last year and then spring of this year, we would have invited the representatives from the 911 center and from the GIS. If you have a GIS office, we would have invited the GIS office as well. I believe we also tried to reach out to the IT office when we knew who it was.
Would that have gone to the sheriff? Mr. Cully, would that have gone to the sheriff's office or? They were 911, so that's who would have.
We didn't have an IT guy.
There are 119, and sometimes an email gets changed that we're not aware of, that it could have been something along those lines. I, again, apologize for any failure to reach out to the right people. But
Well, we appreciate you being here tonight.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Black?
I just have one person we haven't heard from. I know that E911 has run through the sheriff's office, but Chief Loftus, and I'm not asking you tonight to put you on the spot, but with other fire departments, in some areas 911 is run by the fire, I would imagine, correct, fire? And if you could get us some information from other localities, what's going on with them, I mean, and as far as your take on things as well, I would really appreciate that, because I know we've heard from Major Mosier, but I'd also like to hear from you because you're part of them. You'd have to respond, but I would like to hear from you as well. What's that? Sure, come on up.
We recently had a regional fire chiefs meeting here in Caroline, which encompasses everybody in the Richmond metro area and most of the people in the Chester switch. From the fire department side, that was not something that most of the fire chiefs knew anything about. And in the meeting we had, no one knew anything about that. That doesn't mean it's not happening. It doesn't mean it's not prevalent in the 911 centers. It's just not prevalent in the fire chiefs group.
Okay. And just on the 911 side, just out of curiosity in Carolina, who gets a higher volume of calls, you or the sheriff's department?
I don't have the sheriff's data, so I don't know.
Is that something we can find out?
Lisa, Major? I can't provide that data to you. I don't have it.
He has it in that
Okay.
Major Mosier can.
So you have, at this time, you have no opinion on the system as far as?
It's not something I've been well versed in, and it came up in a staff meeting, and we've tried, Chief Garnett and myself tried to get educated through this process and talking with Major Mosier. We did speak with somebody on the wireless board that represents the fire chiefs to get a little more understanding of what's going on, how long it's been going on. But other than that, it's not in my bailiwick to know.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
Did
Thank
any
you,
of those
Chief.
fire chiefs run the 911 system, or they were all run out of sheriff's office? I'm just curious.
I don't know enough about each one to know whether they did. I just know as a group of chiefs,
Yeah.
that's not something we do.
Thank you, sir.
There are about 5 911 centers in Virginia under the fire department.
5?
About 5. There are probably about a little more than that that are run under independent agencies, like Fairfax County has its own department that does, and Virginia Beach is another one that has its own department because of size that justifies that. Most in Virginia are run by the sheriff. Historically, 80% of the calls to 911 are in law enforcement in nature versus 20% that are public or that are fire and rescue. However, of those, if you look at emergencies, it tends that EMS is actually the majority of the true emergency type calls are EMS compared to law enforcement because there's a lot of non-emergency calls that get called in. That's generally speaking throughout the industry, our general rule of thumb.
Steve, I want to thank you very much for being here tonight. Anybody else have any more questions before we let him go because the night's moving on?
Yeah, but
Mr. Thomas.
He's a critical one. You said there was no funding available for additional towers to cover wireless service.
Correct. Unless it's done through some other NTI grant or something that I'm not aware of.
And you also said in the question I asked you, the farmer that fell in 2023 will have access to 911 on a wired line.
Absolutely. The wireline network currently provided by Verizon or CenturyLink or whomever, or any competitive local exchange carrier, will absolutely interface to the next generation 911 system. But it'll be converted from analog to IP by Verizon when it's passed off to AT&T to be processed to the 911 center.
Okay, and we could still buy off this Virginia Beach system if that's a different vendor.
Absolutely. And I will say one other really great advantage to next-gen coming is it's not going to be hardware-based anymore, and it's not going to be this, you're locked into Verizon or AT&T. It's a service. And for want of, it's like switching a cell phone and saying, hey, I now want to go with, I'd say AT&T, but they probably don't have coverage here for wireless, but a switch to Sprint or from Verizon or whatever. What you would typically have to do is pay for 1 month of overlap. You pay this one's last month and this one's next month, and you can switch. 90% of what's in the migration proposal, you'll have to do whether it's Verizon or whether it's AT&T or whether it's some other solution, because all the GIS work, all of the equipment upgrades, all of that needs to be done regardless of who provides the solution. So it is something that's coming, and we're here to help. We recognize that there was a breakdown in communications to where we didn't get the message to all of you. We apologize for that. But we're here for the long haul. I've been doing this 18 years for the state and 32 years in 911. We know this, and we can help you make this decision. But I guess my key message is the decision's coming, and it is going to be something that's going to be driven by regions, because what you do is going to impact everybody from you all the way down to Greensville County, all the way to the North Carolina state line. You're at the top, they're at the bottom. Everything in between is impacted by this deployment, and we're the people trying to keep everybody talking and knowing what's going on. So thank you for the invitation and the opportunity to explain it to you, and again, we're here to help any way we can.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Gentlemen, we are going to move on with public comment so we do not keep citizens waiting before we take a break. So at this time, if there is anyone here who would like to make a comment or a statement on any issue which is not a public hearing, you may come forward at this time. Is there anyone who would like to make a comment or talk to the board about anything that is not a public hearing this evening? Good evening. If when you come up, you just tell us your voting district and your name, we'd appreciate it.
I'm Maddie Terrell in Caroline County,
I'm Mr. Terrell.
Steinberg Road with the Glen. I'm here to find out the roads down on 652 and Ruther Glen Road and down Route 30. The gutters, the pipes or whatever, haven't been cleaned out in 5 or 6 years. And every time it rains, the water just stands, and where they patched the highway, they didn't put enough tar or whatever there. And it sink, the hole is sink. You hit it with your car, and the water just stand in the road, just come down in people's yard, and down there, Second Mount Zion Church. They can't even go home when it really rains because the whole road is covered, flooded out. So I would like to know what we're supposed to do. Somebody supposed to clean the gutters?
And would you have those road numbers?
The gentleman from, can I respond?
Yes.
The gentleman from VDOT was here, and I voiced our concern that we've called him based on the numbers that I gave all the citizens, and I told him I was concerned that they had not responded.
No, they didn't.
And so I will, again, call him again tomorrow, Mr. Bates, that's the gentleman. But I voiced that earlier, and he said he was concerned that they had not responded. But I'll have an answer for you by tomorrow, for sure.
Okay,
Thank you very much.
thanks.
Is there anyone else that would like to speak tonight in public comment? Anyone else? Seeing no one else, we will close public comment. We will take a 15-minute break and then move on with the rest of our meeting. Thank you. We will reconvene the meeting. We are at public hearings on the agenda, and I believe you're up with this, Mark? We are number 4, member chapter 103, article 3 of the Code of Virginia.
Good evening, Madam Chair, Board, staff. The purpose of tonight's public hearing, this first one, amendment of Chapter 103, Article 3, 103-14 of the Code of Caroline County Agricultural, Horticultural, Forest, and Open Space Uses. I had previously suggested that the Board consider to go to a 2-year revalidation period opposed to a 1-year revalidation for land use. Purpose, again, was trying to stay in front of some legislation that had been recently considered but not passed down at General Assembly. A little bit easier on our folks that's in the program, and a little bit of cost savings to the county. There is one point that I want to clarify. We did, after extensive work with staff and Mr. Emerson, the word biannual is going to be biennial. And I'm going to notify the Commissioners Association for the other localities that use the word biannual and the ones that do the 2-year, that actually means twice a year. Our office received a call and said, why on earth are we going to have to do this twice a year now? So we, if the consideration is to adopt this ordinance amendment, we want to make sure and say biennial. Any questions, or you want to take from the public first?
Thank you. We'll take public comment and then open it up to the board. All right. If anyone would like to speak on this topic, please come forward, state your name, voting district. You have 3 minutes to speak. Anyone who'd like to speak, please come forward. Is anyone who would like to speak on this issue, please come forward. Seeing no one, the public hearing is closed. Discussion. Gentlemen, do I have discussion or a motion?
Madam Chair, I'll make a motion that we amend Chapter 103, Taxation, Article 3, Agricultural, Horticultural, Forest, and Open Space Use of Code of Caroline County to go to every 2 years as to not make a mistake.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate you saving us some money.
Mr. Bassoon, so with the money we save from this, we can get rid of the stickers? Is that what you were saying earlier?
Yeah,
I'm just being facetious.
It can chip in towards it.
All right, that brings us to our second public hearing this evening, which is a amendment to our budget. Mr. Cully, I assume you're taking this one?
I do have that one. Madam Chair, members of the board, this is the updated numbers. You know, we had a public hearing scheduled for this at the last meeting, but we had gotten a change from VRS right when we were preparing the packet just about. But our new numbers, as are reflected in your executive summary, is $4,040,134 in personnel-related costs to the county's adopted budget for FY 18 and 19. Would take the Caroline detention employees through January 31st. Now, VRS has said they'd like to transition December 31st and have them all put back as authority employees for January 1, but we left a little room in there just in case that, because that's dependent on VRS, not really dependent on us. So hopefully they will be able to do the actuary studies and the things that they need to do to be able to get that done, and they'll transition on that 6-month period and start January 1st. But anyway, it's all those are covered by the federal dollars. So it's just a budget, a way for us to pay payroll and the related expenses with payroll until January 31st as needed. Now, of course, that doesn't happen, and we have to go into February. We may have to have an additional appropriation, but I wouldn't expect any more budget hearings. So if it slips by a month or so, that we could handle that by just an appropriation amount of the revenue's always there.
All right. At this time, we will open the public hearing on this issue. If there's anyone who would like to speak on this issue, please come forward at this time. If there's anyone that would like to speak on this issue, please come forward. Anyone who'd like to speak? Seeing none, hearing none, this public hearing is closed. Board, do you have any discussion or motion?
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion that we approve the proposed amendment to the fiscal year 2018-2019 budget to include the regional detention center at this time.
Do I have a second? Second. I have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, so moved. Unfinished business. We talked a lot about this a few minutes ago, but next on our unfinished business is continued discussion of the next generation 911 service. Anybody else have any more venting they want to do this evening?
I say we table this until we see some localities actually make the transition, so I figure we're probably good for 6 or 8 months. Maybe longer.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure we table it until we see other localities, but at least until we see what happens with Virginia Beach.
Yeah, we want to see what
And
goes
then
on
that
down
gives us a
Hampton
chance.
Roads.
Plus, I would like staff to confirm what was said here, because he said he would pay 24 months' worth of maintenance from the time we implement. And-
Maintenance monthly fees.
Yeah, which is still what they're saying, what we got here in the budget, thing before. But that predicated us on doing something immediately. So, do I have to do it immediately to get that 24 months? Or do I have to
I was not under
implement
the-
to get 24 months?
We'll see if we can get it in writing, but it's my understanding you've got to put in a grant application to do something. So we don't have to do it right away, and we can wait for Virginia Beach and the Hampton Roads area to see if there's a different vendor. If they obviously select AT&T, then you can bid it out yourself, which obviously
Yeah.
would have to hire a consultant to write the bid specs, which they wouldn't cover. And then you put in that grant application, and they will cover the same percentages and amounts that they're covering for other jurisdictions, which is what basically they've got here, the one-time cost for equipment to get it installed and the fiber optics cables to get those installed, and then they will pay the delta between what we're currently paying and what the new monthly reoccurring charges are for 24 months once we go operational. So say if we start this 5 or 6 months from now and it takes 6 months to go operational, then you'd have 2 years after that, which we could be this year in 19, so you'd be 2021. But at some point, you're going to be on the hook for that increased monthly reoccurring costs.
Right, but what we got presented at our last meeting from the Sheriff's Department is we had to move quickly to get access to this grant money.
I think that's because there was this adoption schedule put forth by VEDA.
Right,
that
but
they
that's
wanted these
contradictory to what he said tonight.
Yeah, they want but they still, not totally, they've got the 32 counties that are all using the same E911 switch. They're trying to move all those off in a reasonable time period, because if there's the one left or two left, they're still paying the full amount for that 911 switch to Verizon. And if they get all the counties off of Verizon and turn that switch off, they don't owe Verizon any money. So that would be, I think we could say we're not going, but then they may hand us our reoccurring cost of Verizon could skyrocket if we're the only one left on a Verizon switch, and VEDA says we're not paying because you didn't move.
But I mean, we're gonna move eventually because we don't have any choice.
I agree, but I said that's the hammer they've got over top of you. If the region's 32 if we're the only one that doesn't move in a timely fashion of the 32 on that switch, and then that cost is something astronomical.
We're going to move in a timely fashion.
Then
my point is, we don't have to automatically have a grant application in by November 1st.
no, we just got to have it in certain days in front of their board meeting every time the wireless board meets.
Okay. That's the only.
The agenda deadline for their board meeting to approve. So if you miss it, then you're just stuck to the next time they meet, and they don't meet every month, so it just prolongs it a month or two until they meet again.
And I think I don't know how we could know how fast we have to move until we know what group we're in of that 32, who's on what switch, because we wouldn't have that information.
And I'm going to second
He's
Mr. Seeley's
gonna
motion
get it
that
to
we
us.
table this until we know what's happening with Verizon, with
Oh, yeah, we're
Virginia
not
Beach.
gonna, we're just discussing, so.
Okay. Was that a motion, Mr. Seeley?
Yes,
We will
sir.
bring it back up.
So I seconded it.
All right. So,
What was the motion?
That we wait until we see what happens with Virginia Beach.
And we have to see what the other localities are going to, I don't want to be first, second, third, fourth, or fifth. I want there to be true lessons learned before we make a move, because there's going to be more pain in this than I think anybody even realizes.
Okay, and I'll amend my second to say the same, except I don't want to be first or second.
Okay.
I don't think you want to be fourth or fifth.
And we'll
I think
discuss
we got
that.
the general, I think we have the general idea
Yeah,
of
we'll
the
discuss
motion.
fourth and fifth as that comes.
All right. Ben, we okay? General idea?
Right.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, we are going to move on to Article number 7 for discussion. Who's, Mr. Parton, are you doing this?
No,
No,
it's still me.
Mr. Kelly.
I typed something in there I don't want, but hold on a second. I'll change it. Computers. I created, the spreadsheet was in your, not in your packet. I thought we had the, I thought we were doing the one little half sheet that I printed. Oh, I didn't, all right, well, I probably need this down there. Can I get to that down there real quick? Give me 1 sec.
We're going to have a technical break here.
You go, sir. Hey, Joe. Don't fall in. All right, now you can hear me and see this all at the same time. So what I created is Hanover does something similar. And so the last time we talked about this, I gave you a gigantic fold-out spreadsheet. This is data from that same sheet. But at that time, it had what our current benefit to employees for health insurance amount was, which was like $6,030 or something. And I took and I put 3% on that and grew that out 3% a year over the life of what the benefits would be, which is about 24 years. It's ongoing once you adopt a thing. So, but at the time, I looked at about 24 years worth of data and showed you what those numbers were, and they were pretty extreme. What I created here was if you just gave a flat amount. So if you gave $125, see, then all the numbers change. So if I get to the bottom, you can see that the cost over 24 years, if you just look at the 20 employees that currently have 20 years worth of service, it would average around $10,000 yearly, $249,000 over the 24 years. But that's not totally true, because as you average in people that got 19 years of service and 18 years, they're going to fall into this table. So the more realistic look, and I'll just change that back to 250 so you can see that total number. And that's why I made this so you could see it instead of trying to print it all out. But if you come down and look at that, if you go up to the 250 a month, it goes up to about $20,000 a year annual cost and $498,000. But a more realistic look is probably looking at this 15-year. These are employees that are currently with the county that have 15 years of service, and maybe a couple that have 14.9 months. But so I kind of had a cutoff right around that window. But you can see that as you look at that at 250, you went from $498,000 to your total cost is $783,000, and your monthly cost, sorry, I made this bigger so some of the columns don't work, is about $32,000 a month. So I think that's more a max end. I don't think it would be quite that bad, but it's a better max end, but because that builds in people in those out years. Because see, this chart goes across all these years. So you can see if you just look at people with 20 years, they're going to finish up, they start dropping out. But if you've got people that had 19 years, they are coming in, and the people with 50, so it is creating an ongoing obligation, but you do have more control over it if you pick a fixed amount, whatever that is. And I'm not making any recommendation on that, but whatever that number is becomes mathematically, and what Hanover does is adjust that number ever so often. Now theirs is more complicated because Hanover does it if you've got 10 years with the county and you retire, you get $50, and if you got 15, you get $100. They've got different tiers based on how long you've worked for the county. Up into, you've worked there 20 years or whatever the max is, you get the most money. So they set up different tiers. This is just if you retire with us with 30 years of service. So this is really limited to, you've got to have worked for us for 30 years, not work for VRS for 30 years. And so that's what this looked at.
But it's still, Charlie, because the end result is up until age 65.
It still ages out. And so we have some people, if you see the red numbers on this screen, those people don't get the benefit because they will be over 65 when they get their 30 years of service with us.
And we did this before. We talked about it, and the school system spent, how much money did anybody remember?
260 something.
A year.
Correct.
$260,000 a year.
Yes.
And in this one, the worst case is $32,000 a year for county employees at 15 years.
Yeah, but theirs was 100% paid, and this is at 250. So if this goes up, if I took this back up to get us to the $6,000 range, what is that for? $50 a month? Not enough. $6,500. I'm just late in the day. So just at to get us back close to what we currently pay, you'll see this is going to jump up pretty significant. I don't want to scroll by it. $65,000 a year.
That's for 25?
That's for 15.
That's for the 15. That's looking at
Yeah.
15. In the first years, these years don't change much other than whatever the value you put on it. Because it's as the middle of it's where it gets really big, where we're going to have a fair amount of people, reach it and get some, benefit.
Mr. Colley, I got a couple, Mr. Colley, I got a couple questions. On this, so with the 30 years, so if I started working in the sheriff's department, fire department when I was 22, get my 30 years, I'm 52, I got 13 years on this, correct?
Correct.
Technically be.
Correct.
Do any of the
65.
localities cap it out, or do they do like a tiered system? Like if I started when I was 22, did any localities say, all right, I have to have 35 years in? Because if...
I don't think we've seen any data to that. There's not many localities doing it, so most of them, if you reach 30, then you get it.
Is that, Benny, could you legally do that? Like if you said, all right, if you started working for the sheriff's department under 30 years, let's say you're under 30 years old, you're 25 years old, now you have to have, our requirement is you have to have 35 years. Because that would put you at 35 years plus the 20 would put you right at 60.
I think if you...
And if you're over 30, it would be 30 years.
I think a better way of looking at it, if you want to limit how many years you give the benefit, then you say everybody's got to work to 60.
Or you could say max 5 years.
That's what I'm saying. Everybody, max 5 years.
Payment
But
5 years.
I don't think you want to look at it, well, Joe started it
Okay.
when he was 22, and now we're going to make him work longer.
Right. So 30 years and max cap at 5 then?
Well, this is 15 again.
No, but I'm saying,
Yeah, this is assuming people, and this has got people that would be eligible to retire way underneath. In this column, average years of the benefit is this average years to, sum of benefit. So it's the last column, the one with the red numbers in it. So let me get my, all right, so this employee would have 6.89 if they retired right when they had 30 years of service. And not everybody's going to do that. I'm looking around the room and know some people that aren't going to be able to pull that off. But here's one, they'll have 15 years. So if they retire with 30 years of service, they would have 15 years of the benefit. Another one with 16. I don't know that they're going to retire. All I can do is give you the data of when people would be eligible for the benefit. I know some of the people in this chart are not going to take it. They better not. Yeah, Medicare is still eligible right now unless they change the benefit at 65, even though Social Security for a lot of us is 67 and above. Is it 5 years? 5 years. Oh, after working for 5 years, you get it, right. It's not capped at 5 years,
We're
right.
not doing that. We can't-
I know somebody would become immediately eligible for that program.
Charlie, you can't, in this spreadsheet, you can't cap a 5-year payment max, can you?
Yeah. Not easily, but yeah, I could cap that and give it to you.
But I mean, you could, yeah, I mean, you could say, okay.
Because what I've got is each employee, and then I just manually calculated the years that they would get a benefit. So, like the one that gets it 16 is just 16 rows. Some of the people get it beyond this sheet. You know, I just stopped at 24 years. There are going to be people in this that go beyond it. So that,
Yeah.
but yeah, I can figure that out. Here I was just trying to create a sheet that showed me what the potential would be if you didn't fund it at our current insurance amount, but just at some amount as a benefit. All right, we're going to supplement your health insurance by $300.
So Mr. Cully,
You know, it's $3,600 a year, and then that's what the total cost of the program potentially could be.
can you go back to the 30 years for a sec? What's the cost at 30 years? It was like $32,000 a year.
Oh,
right?
cost per year.
Yeah.
For which amount?
It was for 30 years.
No.
The
What?
supplement
I mean,
amount.
what is, yeah. I
That
guess.
was $250, I think. 32,625 is $250.
But that's assuming that like some employees might be on it for 15 years.
That's right. But Yeah, that's an average, so that looks at that whole 24
So
years.
if you said that there was a cap at 5, though, that number would be reduced by quite a bit.
Quite a bit.
Well, y'all get me all confused now.
Everybody's trying to get out of this, we're going to volunteer. Everybody's,
I-
all the appellate thing,
Are there a question for Mr. Cully? So we can get him out.
Mr. Cully, I guess I would like to see the numbers at like the 15, the 20, the 25, and the 30 capped at 5 years.
Okay.
What
And
that
remember,
would be.
the 15 and the 20 is just changes the group of employees that we're looking at. It's
Right.
all still assuming you've worked 30 years for the county.
Right.
And so now you want, everybody's got to
No, okay.
either be 60 or they only get 5 years of the benefits. So if they retire at 52, they would only get 5 years.
starting at 60.
Starting at 60 or just capped for 5 years, 52 to 57. It doesn't matter. I mean, it's just
Cap at
5 years.
Cap at
But,
5 years.
but this number here was if you worked 15 years for the county?
No. All of them are if you worked 30. This number here is how many employees. See, watch when I go up, I'm at line 52. That's 52 employees that got 15 years plus with the county. And if you go over to 20, it's less. It's not the years of service, it's how many people would be eligible as you move forward on that 20 years. Because if you've already got 15 years in here, and you go 15 more, you would fit in the table out in those out years.
So we don't have a number that says this is what it would cost the county if we did this at 15 years of service, 20, 25.
Oh,
or 30
no,
years
then
of
that
service.
it would be more. This is assuming all these people work 30.
Have worked 30 years.
Yeah, if you allow people to take and only, say, worked half of their career somewhere else, me, then that throws a different equation in it altogether. We're only looking at making everybody work 30 years for Caroline. The difference from the 15 and the 20 is just the subset of employees I looked at currently meet that standard to say, oh, if you've already got 20 years, likely are you're going to go 10 more and have 30 years with us.
This is really a very few number of people. I can think of a couple of people that started in their 20s and maybe worked 30 years.
Well, he's saying there's 40-some people that are in that category right now.
They've worked 15 already.
Already.
They worked 15
And
already.
then as you move up, people that have been here 15 years, you just showed somebody that would collect 16, you could potentially pay 16 years for them.
Yeah, see, you got people, when you go to 20, there's 26 or so, 25 people, depending on where my line numbers are, but you can see we went from 53 in a line number to 26 in a line number. So in 5 years more of service, I lost that many people.
It's not really that many
I
people.
personally think that 15 years to get a 5-year benefit's not that long, but then you're
No,
talking.
I'm not proposing that.
No.
So I'm just saying, I don't think we need to calculate.
You're proposing, your idea is the 30, right? As a-
30, that's all we've
30
looked at, is
years.
30.
So if we did 30 and 5, the number would be much smaller than that.
Correct, I can calculate that for you and send it out. Probably.
Yeah, you're not
Oh, we
talking,
do
Yeah.
25.
Because
you're
you,
really not talking
And
benefit at all.
you don't really, and that does not require the age. So if someone wanted to collect it at 55 for 5, they could, and it's not age requirement, right? It's just.
Correct.
Okay.
but you can see some of the people getting the benefits only a year or two.
Yeah.
Some people, multiple 10 years and,
And that's not really the benefit that Major Mosier wanted to use as a retention tool.
No.
Because I'm 64 now, theoretically. I can retire or let's say 60, 59.
Yeah.
I've been here 30 years. Why would I stay? Because I'm only going to get $300 for 5 years. Is that?
Because you're going to get to use our
Right,
insurance
but
company.
But,
You're going to be group.
but I mean, what's the real? Because the whole
Yeah.
purpose of this was a retention tool. So as a retention tool, how do you see this playing out? So the lieutenant that we both know is up there is 59 and a half or whatever. How do we get him to stay a couple more years?
The fact that y'all are talking about it has changed the attitude of the employees already. This is a hot topic for the employees in this county. They have all been talking about, well, I've got to make it another 7 years, and then I can retire and get the health insurance. So it's been a real positive spin for the employees.
But the reality behind Major Mosier, and I think I'm the one who kind of, yeah, I did bring it up, but the fact of the matter is that, yeah, you're welcome. To me, it should be a reward rather than a retention tool. This is a reward to the counties that have stuck us, like when we do the salary study, that's a reward for when they do the 0.5%, or if you look at the salary study for the people that have been around for a long time, it is a reward. I'm going to be honest with you, like, when I go to, as a teacher, something like when I go to a different county, it's my benefits, my health benefits are not a retention tool for someone who's in their 20s. For someone who has been in with the county for 25 and 30 years, and they're getting close to retirement, and they see that system is in place, I think to me, it's a reward for the employees that have stuck around a long time. That's the intent of it. I don't think no, because the person who's at 25 and 30 years is not going to be leaving the sheriff's department anyway.
But you have a percentage of the young people that are going to move anyhow. It's just a generation that it is.
Right, and that's not going to mean anything to them.
But the experienced officers that we've trained and put a lot of money and time and effort into, those are the ones we want to keep that can mentor the other deputies. Because we do have a natural turnover for the young people anyhow. So we want to keep those guys working. Like Stacy Carey, he's on the list. We want to keep Keith Chapman working. He's on the list. So those guys are the ones that guide the way.
Mr. Cullen asked me to speak.
How to do the job. And we need those people here. Because right now, law enforcement can retire at age 50 and 25 years of service. And some of them may choose to do that. And the ones that choose to stay lose their $1,104 benefits from Leo Supplement. So they're losing $1,100 a month by staying with the county. And after the age of 50. I lost it for 5 years. I don't want to be here. And I don't even want to participate in this program. I want to be here when I'm 65.
All right.
I'm just saying, not all of them are like that.
Right, and I think my suggestion is going to be, we get a copy of the chart to everybody. We also maybe get the sheriff to explain to us a little bit about the 25 to 30-year service and the funds that you're talking about losing, and how this would help you. Get it back to us, give us some time to digest it, and we'll bring it back at another meeting. Fire and rescue also, yeah. Because we'd like to keep those who have served us for a long time around, and I know that being able to stay in a group health insurance would be beneficial.
Thank you.
So is that all right with everybody, that we get some information, and get this chart so we can look at it, and we'll bring it back in another
I
meeting?
just don't want to burden staff, because I don't think anybody's looking at anybody that hasn't done 30 years. And I think we're basically looking at a flat fee between $300 and $500 is where I think I've heard from each one.
So, yeah, I would be for finding out about the different programs and what the sheriff needs and what the 5-year cap possibly, or either doing
There
an
should be a
age
5-year,
cap.
yeah.
So we'll get those figures and then bring this back. Thank you very much, everyone, for your work on that. That takes us to new business. And I know Davenport's been here for a while.
Courtney, when does your assistant get to give the presentation? You're at the wrong side. You're at the wrong side of it. Hey, Courtney, with that new E9, with the NG 911 system, you could actually video teleconference to your associate. He could do the presentation, and you could just watch.
Extreme high school football. Got to check, how much is my bill?
I mean,
Because I pay water, $100 a month. How much am I going up?
Joey, I think yours outweighs the...
Mr. Rogers didn't put a lot of fluff in this. Madam Chair, members of the board, Mr. Rogers is here with Davenport to review the county's rate study. The staff has made several attempts to have rate increases over the years and thought it was important at this point to go back and really do a complete review of the utility system and its financial status, and to look at a multiple-year program when it comes to rate increases. So with that, we thought it was important to have Mr. Rogers to come in and actually do a complete review of the system. We looked at the utility fund historically, the debt fund, rate comparisons, financial policies. We also have looked at the Dawn system and what it would take to make that sufficient. And he's going to make recommendations for proposed rate increases at the end of this. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Rogers.
Thank you, Joey. So I think there's about 70 pages, so I figure if I take 2 or 3 minutes each, we'll be here to midnight, if that's okay. So I'm going to try to hit some of the highlights. Let me just start out big picture. A lot of times we're here with good news, and the news here is that utility systems cost money, unfortunately. I thought about this as I was going through it tonight, and I wish I'd put it in here. There's a chart that I've seen that is by AWWA, and that is the American Water Works Association, which is kind of the big association that most of the utility folks are part of. And one of their consultants did a 10-year average of what increases have been in terms of both water and the wastewater side, and it was in the 7, 8, 9% range on average across the country. So that is a background. What we were asked to do is look at the systems and kind of give you some idea of where you stand. So we're going to look at the historicals. We're going to go back and look and see what's been going on the last several years. We're going to use some comparisons. We looked at both rated entities in the state, those entities rated by Moody's, and also some of your neighbors. We're going to look at where we are in terms of existing debt. As Joey mentioned, we develop a pro forma so we can look at a base case of over the next several years, also to look at a couple of alternatives, and we'll get into those details in a little bit. One of the things that we want to look at is, at the moment, the system itself doesn't have any cash. There's no reserves. So if something breaks right now, they basically have got to come to the general fund to get dollars to go into the system. And that may be fine, but one of the things we want to talk about is maybe what rates would it take to put a little bit of money over in the utility system for emergency purposes and for ongoing capital, so that we don't have to go to the debt market each time. Then we're going to look at the rate impacts. We're going to show you where you are in terms of the customer bills now, and then we'll talk about financial policies briefly as well, especially on the heels of the county getting its first ever bond rating. I'm going to skip through a couple of these pages, but just kind of hit a couple of high points, because we talked about this as we were going through the general fund rating. Utility ratings aren't much different in terms of why they're important. So let's flip over to page 5 and just look at the fact that right now, of course, we don't have a rating. As you all will recall, we had S&P and Moody's rated the counties at AA and AA2. The utility system would have its own bond rating if you went to the public market, because we're more than likely, if we get to that point and are issuing away from the state agency like a VRA or a bank loan, we would be issuing what we call revenue bonds. And that would be the point at which the system would be standing on its own, which is probably several years away, because we're going to need more users to be able to spread the fixed cost around, if you will. And I know that's something that we've talked about for a number of years. The next couple of pages have the methodologies, and I'm really just going to point out that really big picture what the agencies are going to look at are some of the things we're going to talk about tonight. And that is the system itself. In terms of Moody's, it's looking at the asset condition, system size, how big is your O&M, what's the wealth level of the area, financial strength, what's your coverage been, how much cash do you have on hand, how many days can you operate. Days cash on hand means how many days can you operate if no more revenue dollars come in the door. Debt to operating revenues, how much debt do you have as a percentage of your overall revenues. And then management, which entails rate management and compliance, capital planning, and then the legal provisions in terms of what are your legal provisions on your documents in terms of a rate covenant and any reserve requirements. S&Ps on the next page is very similar. I think the thing to point out here is that how big coverage and liquidity, which is the cash, they're both 40% of the financial risk profile. So that's really the two things that we focus on when it comes to policies, when it comes to utilities. So looking on page 9 in terms of coverage, so looking over the last 5 years, fiscal 13 to fiscal 17, as far as revenues...
We got to get you to throw away blue on your laptop.
Doesn't work good on your system.
It never shows up, and we always end up
It's much easier
with
to look at your book.
blue numbers.
Yeah, I hear you. The light shade does not see. I see it's not showing up very well there. The big picture, essentially, your operations, your operational revenues, are covering your operational expenditures, and I know that's something we tried to focus on, and that has continued. In fact, you've actually spun off. If you look at the net revenue line, which is in a light tan before net operating revenues, about halfway down the page, you'll see that those numbers are all positive, which means that after you've paid your operating expenditures, operational revenues are falling to the bottom line to help pay for debt service. So that's a good thing. One day we want to have a lot more of those, but at the moment, there's a balance between how much you can put on the users, and I know that's a discussion we've had for many years. Then you, under non-operating revenues, you add the connection fees, which of course we know those go up and down depending upon the market. And then essentially what's left over comes from the general fund in order to pay debt service. And if you look at the very bottom line, you can see that the general fund transfers as a percentage of debt service. So in the last couple of years, it's been roughly 50% of the debt service is being paid by the general fund transfers. I'm going to skip the next slide. This is just more of a graphic of what we just talked about. And go to page 11, which is the historical connection fees. So this kind of gives you a sense over the last 10 years, and we've got 2018 to date. The number of connections have averaged about 50 over the last 10 years. We're roughly about $1 million a year. Just so you know, as we go forward, we've been talking with staff. There's fewer lots out there at the moment. And so we're going to be very conservative and only use 24 going forward as we do our pro forma. Obviously, if we're wrong, the number is at the historical average of 50. That's more dollars that will hit the bottom line, and we can use that to either reduce debt or not have to issue debt for other projects that may come along. Of course, if growth continues to pick up, there may be other things that need to be done on the system as well to be able to support those additional connections. No, go ahead. Yeah, Alex running the chart for me here. I figure I can go faster that way.
You're averaging almost 45?
It's right at 50. 51 was the average. You've got a high of 68, 67 in another year, and a low of 25.
The last few years, 14 on, you're doing better than
Yes. Last 5 years have been right about it's about that 50 average.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So I'm going to skip. So coverage, and that's, again, one of the things that I talked about the agencies are looking at. We're going to talk about in a moment what they're looking for in terms of what levels. But at the moment, our legal coverage requirement when it comes to VRA is to at least pay them back. Essentially, we need to have one-time revenues, whether it comes from the general fund, from the operations, or from connection fees. And so we've been doing that. On page 13, this is the methodology that the agencies are now using after they revised it just a few years ago. And it basically shows that what they really want to see, for you to be in an A-rated entity, they want to have at least 1.25s. And what that means is that you are creating net revenues after you pay expenditures, operating, not debt service yet, just operating, that you've got 25% more dollars than your debt service you're paying. So you basically have dollars falling to the bottom line that can be used for reducing debt. It can be used for ongoing capital. Systems are notorious for having to keep pumps running and things like that, replacing. So you constantly are in need of dollars. In terms of S&P, in terms of getting their highest level, they're looking for 160. You're going to see on the next chart, go ahead and flip to page 14, that this is a comparison that we've done. On the left side are entities that are rated by Moody's, and the bottom part of that chart with the green darker bars are basically AA rated entities in Virginia. Interestingly enough, there are no A-rated or lower Virginia utilities in the state, and I think that's because we've got VRA that most of those folks would go to and use rather than issuing bonds as an A-rated entity. They can go to VRA and use VRA's credit and get a better bond rate. But in terms of the AA, you can see where you stand currently in terms of coverage. And if you look at that group on the left-hand side, UOSA is the only one that's even close to 1 times. And they're a wholesaler. They're basically getting their money from Fairfax and some of the others, so they really don't need to have a lot of coverage. So if you take them out, though, you'll notice that the lowest one is like Ravenna, and they're in the 170, 180 range. And then you can see Norfolk right below that. If you look at Spotsylvania is well above 2 times.
And what are we at?
Well, we're not even at 1 times, because remember, 50% of the debt service is being paid by the general fund. These are system revenues, not general. These are not general funds.
Just system revenues.
These are system revenues on the left-hand side only. Right. Now, on the right side are some of your neighbors and entities. We've used Draper Aiden's report that they put out annually. This is from their 2017 report, and used some of the CAFR data to basically go and look at some of your neighbors. You've got larger neighbors such as Stafford and Spotsylvania again in here. But when you look at some of these entities, they're all over the board. You got Carroll and Orange, who are well below you, so they must be getting money from the general fund as well. Then you've got folks like Warrenton, who's got lots of coverage.
And King George is where they're at because of the fee they tack onto their bill every month. They've actually got
They have a debt service fee.
debt service fee every month on their bill.
So let's flip and look at cash on hand. So this is the other big metric that the rating agencies would be looking at if we were heading down that path. And what you'll see is that at this point in time, there is no cash. There is no cash, no reserves. And the reason, the reason has been over the last several years, finance has basically used that cash to pay debt service so that it minimizes what's coming out of the general fund.
So we're paying 50%, you said?
It's right at 50% of debt services coming from the general fund.
And that's as long as we have connection fees in the 50 range. Is that true, Mr.
That's
Collins?
true.
So once we don't have 50 connections, the amount we come from the general fund, and what are we paying from the general fund right now, about 1.3, 1.4?
Actually,
Huh? 2.3.
yeah, it's like 2.2
Turn
and
your mic
change.
on.
Yeah, about 2.2 this year. It was up. Remember when we went through the budget, and then we went through that whole, lowering the fees to try to spur some growth because we don't have any lots, so we couldn't see where we were going to get any connections, which was really worrisome.
And that's really our biggest dilemma, is there are no lots in any of the large subdivisions.
developed.
There's nothing open. They haven't put infrastructure in, so they can't even build on them.
Correct.
So that's a bigger problem until lot prices go up. So what we're really looking at is, as the connections go down, it's going to take more out of the general fund. We've got to do something water and sewer rate-wise to at least prop it up a little bit. I'm not saying be exorbitant, but I'm saying we got to do something. Is that what you're, I guess,
That's where we're
ahead of
headed.
you. Okay.
That is where we're headed, correct. Because one of the things that again, as I said at the outset, I understand what finance was doing. They basically said, hey, look, at the end of the year, we're going to use as much cash as we've got to pay debt service so that we minimize what's coming out of the general fund. But the problem with that is there's no money if there's some type of emergency in the middle of the year. There's no money in the general fund, in the utility fund, and so there's just no cash. And so that's something that we'll talk about here in some of our cases here in a moment. On page 16, you'll see the methodology from the rating agencies in terms of what they like to see. An A-rated entity, they'd like to see days cash, and that's how many days you can run with cash without any revenues coming in. Anywhere between 35 and 150 days, AA 150 to 250. What we're going to propose is trying to get to 90 days at some point, and that's going to take some years to get there. And that way, basically, you've got 3 months worth of cash sitting there for whatever you need, whether a pump goes down and you need to have some dollars on hand to go and buy that pump that wasn't provided for and things like that. Because right now, correct me if I'm wrong, but there's really no money in the budget either for capital, for many, smaller capital projects like that. There's not a line item in the budget for just maintenance type things that are happening in the utility side. So on page 17, just to give you a sense of where others are, again, this is the same group that we just saw on coverage on the left-hand side, days cash on hand. And I didn't mention this before, but you can see the medians in terms of national medians for AA as well as single A rated entities, and then the Virginia AA medians at the top part of the chart. The bottom part shows you, again, UOSA is a wholesaler, so they're a little different. They don't really have to have a lot of cash because if they need cash, they basically just send the bill to their 4 people they provide, mainly Fairfax County. And then, but the others are all use retail systems, if you would, that would have to cover any shortfalls in cash. They've got to basically raise rates. So outside of Hampton Road Sewer is one of the lower ones, and they're 200 plus days. On the right-hand side, you can see some of the other smaller entities, folks around the area here as well. And other than a couple outliers like Smith and Carroll, most of them have at least 180 days, it looks like. Maybe it's 150 days with Orange and Cape Charles, some small places like that. So that's all 90 days is not even on here other than Carroll. But that's what we're thinking is at first, let's take some baby steps, try to get out there to maybe 90 days. And you'll see why when I get to the rates in a minute that basically get us there.
So that bottom axis is days on the right-hand side also?
It is.
Okay.
It is. So when we look at where we are debt-wise, we're at $35.5 million in terms of utility debt service. It's $3.1 million currently. It's going to drop down in about 2 years down to 2.9, so we're going to free up about $200,000. Then it's pretty flat there for a while. It drops a little bit, but we really don't see a significant drop out till 2032. So anything we take on at this point is going to need to find additional dollars. And then we've got some small projects we're going to talk about here in a moment that might be able to be absorbed by that $200,000. But anything major after that is going to will have to come from rates or connection fees or the general fund. Page 20 gives you that comparison of debt outstanding, again, using these same folks. You can see that for the rated entities, most of them have debt. Some of them quite a bit of debt. James City is an anomaly. York County as well. But most everybody's got at least $100 million of debt out there for these AA rated entities. For the smaller entities, you can see the size of the debt's obviously a lot smaller. Goochland, Stafford are out there in terms of a lot more than we are, but most of the other folks, they're not too far behind as King George, Carroll, and Emporia. They're not too far behind. So I thought that'd give you a sense of kind of where other folks are. So let's look at where we are in terms of our rate history. On page 22, this goes back to the year 2000. The left side is water, middle is sewer, and then the combined rate on the right-hand side. See, there's a number of years where we didn't raise rates at all. And one of the things that my experience with utilities is when you don't have any rate increase whatsoever, even if it's just 1 or 2%, you're falling behind because utility systems basically are the people who run it, salaries. In terms of chemicals, power, those are the other 2 big ones that are really driving any type of rates, and then capital. Capital can be very large depending upon where you are in the life cycle of the system. You can see in 2009, that was when we made the big adjustments, especially on the sewer side, to try to catch up. And that made a big impact on the combined rate. 5% there, 2010, 11, and 12. Took a breather in 13, and then 5% on the water side in 14. The last increase on the sewer side was in 2012. But all that time, of course, on the operational side, there have been costs that have been going up. So that's one of the things we'll look at in our pro forma coming up. On page 23, you look at the water bill comparison, again, to some of the folks in the area, as well as system sizes similar to ours around the state. And this is, we've got the Draper rating information. From a water rate standpoint, we're actually in pretty good shape. We're toward the bottom quarter of this group. When you flip over to the sewer side...
Is this really one of the ones you want to be in the bottom of, though?
Well, on the sewer side, you flip to the other side and we're at the top part. So there with King George, Cape Charles, ourselves, we're number 3 on this particular list, at least, on the sewer rates. But when you combine everything together, we're basically in the top part of the chart, not at the top, but we are at the top part of that chart. And if you look, I know we don't have the system sizes, but those systems are generally in our same size. So size does matter. It definitely, when you have a larger system, you can spread it out over more users. They can do lower rates. Fairfax County is a prime example of that. Loudoun County has been buying water from them. I've been working with Loudoun Water since I started in the business in 1992, and they are literally, I got an email from them today, they just started producing water out of their very first water plant. They've been buying it from Fairfax County for years because it was cheaper. But they felt like it was time to go ahead and get their first water plant going, and they're about to start operations on that. So I give you a sense of where things are rate-wise. And keep in mind that all these folks are also facing the same issues. Power's going up, chemicals are going up, getting more expensive, and they've got pumps that are breaking and maintenance they've got to do as well. So, and that's why, as I brought up at the very outset, that AWW average is that everyone is having to chase increasing expenses when it comes to utility systems. So this is the pro forma section. I know there's a lot on the page here. I'll just try to hit the high points. Their goal as we're working through these cases is we're going to keep the general fund transfer the same. So we're not going to change that at all. We're going to assume that the general fund doesn't put any more in or any less at this point. So that's going to stay the same throughout our cases. We do have about $1.2 million of projects that we've built in to that. That's for the well development and intake out on the Rappahannock, dollars that we'll need to finance probably in 2019. We are assuming that the Port Royal Townfield project is going to be financed by itself, so that wouldn't be a part of this study, so that's not in here. And so what we're going to try to do is continue the operational expenditures being covered by operational revenues and make sure that we keep that one-time coverage for the existing and any potential new debt that would be coming on board. So the next page just summarizes our assumptions for around the $1.2 million. We did that on page 30. You can see our estimate at almost 5%, so conservative interest rate, about $115,000 a year. We did it over 15 years, knowing we've got other things out there. And again, remember that in 2 years, the debt service does drop down and would be able to cover that, so that's a good thing. Again, on page 31, our assumptions, consumption, this is always a tricky one. We're going to assume that your current users are going to keep using water at the same level. We obviously have wet years like this year where they didn't use as much water to water the lawn. Go back one. Yep. This is for that $1.2 million. This is the intake and the well development. So we assume that consumers are using water at basically the same rate. Nationally, there's been a trend of water usage going down, mainly because of washing machines, people replacing their washing machines with better operating washing machines and toilets and things like that. But we've just assumed that remains constant. Again, as I mentioned, we're going to assume the connection fees are about 24 new homes per year, roughly 550,000. Obviously, we'd love to see that larger, but with the discussion, as Mr. Seeley was just saying, in terms of some of the concerns about lots and things like that, we wanted to be conservative there. We've assumed the transfer would be at the budgeted 2019 amount of $2.2 million. And then on the next page, we've got basically we've assumed a 2.5% increase. There's a lot of numbers here. The bottom right-hand side basically is our assumptions, 2.5% increase on the expenditure side. And in order to cover that and have a little bit of dollars left over at the end of the day, we've had basically water and sewer service charges and administrative fee at 3% per year, and then water and sewer capital asset fee at 5% per year. And what that does is it does cover, again, that debt service that we've got coming on, and it does add a little bit to the bottom line, starting a little in 2020, and it grows each year. In 2021, we have added to fund balance about $220,000, and it grows up to about $420,000 by year 2024. So that way our coverage with fees and transfers goes up to about $115,000. What that means is we'll have some dollars at the end of the day that'll go to that day's cash, as well as in a pinch, we'd have some dollars available for capital. So this is our base case. Skip page 33, go on to 34. This is that day's cash. So we actually get up to 73 days, not quite to the 90 we were talking about. But you'll see it does take us the full 5 years just to get to 73 days, and that's just with a real small 3% rate increase per year. We wanted to put in
Is that 3% on water and sewer?
It is. Water and sewer, and then 5% on the other fee.
So you're not recommending, as a utility district, adding anything
In terms of,
flat, as a utility district, flat?
oh, like just an additive fee flat across the
Correct.
board? Not at this point, not that we can't do it, but we didn't do
I'm
it
just
here.
making sure I understood, because
Yeah.
we're looking at how do we put cash aside for improvements and/or, because as we're moving to 2024, everything in the ground, I guess we haven't talked about, it's getting older and older also.
That's right, and
So-
that's part of the last case we're going to do is trying to add a little bit for, it's probably not enough, but at least it's starting to add some. We're trying to give you a sense of size here. But that's not something we looked at in this case, but it's not something, that doesn't mean we can't look at it in terms of a
Because we started putting utilities in the ground, what year, Joey, 1992? So we're already,
20, yeah, that's 26 years right there.
so it's even older, so, and I guess that's my,
Getting close to 30 years. Yeah.
right, and I'm looking at the town of Bowling Green waited 40 years and the dilemma they now have in trying to fix it all at one time and the huge cost.
Well, there's no doubt, and that's, I mean, City of Richmond is playing catch-up right now on pipes that were put in the ground back in the Civil War days, gas pipes. So, and they basically do it as they break, because they don't have enough money to actually do it all at once, or to have a real plan. Some they do, some they don't. So our alternative case here is what happens if the connection fee revenue declines even further than our 24? What happens if it basically declines 10% annually? What does that look like? And I'm just going to kind of skip straight to, because everything else is the same. And that means we've got to go from 3% per year on page 38 to 4.5% per year on service charge and administrative fee, and the capital asset fee goes to 6.5%. Again, that's just if that availability fee continues to decline. And again, that's keeping the general fund flat. We just wanted to kind of give you a sense of what happens if fees don't come to fruition at even 24. So then our last case is what happens if we, and this goes back to our base case, that we're not declining the availability fee, the connection fee. What happens if we build up some liquidity in PAYGO? And for the moment, we assumed a 50-50 split, that part of the buildup is going to build cash, part of it is going into a fund that can be used for capital projects. Our goal was to try to get to 90 days at the end of the fifth year. And essentially, that's getting to $1.4 million in terms of cash, basically at the end of that fifth year. So in order to do that, on page 44, It's 9% per year. I know, and 11% on the capital asset fee. And part of it is, it's the size. It's just our revenue base is, we've talked about that. We talked about it the last time we did this several years ago. If we could get more users, obviously you got a bigger base to pull from. Otherwise, it's something, as Mr. Seeley was saying, where we go into a flat fee service district type charge to be able to add to that. And this, these aren't even big dollars.
Mr. Rogers, let me ask you this. If we started a 2% now in the utility district, if we started it next year, and we put that aside or use that as a capital, and then raise that to 3% 2 years after, could we catch up if we started that early when it's not real expensive by 2024?
2% of...
2% of, and that's going to be, if I'm not mistaken, Mr. Cully, it's the real estate value. Is that not true if you do utility district? On all the users.
It wouldn't be percentage then. If you're going to use real estate, you have to put pennies. So and it's not based on the utility, it's based on the value of the property.
See, now,
and so that's the way a service district like that, or you can do what we just did in Caroline Pines, where we put it on the bill, which is different.
what I'm saying is if we look early, we start now and we go, what could we do minimally? We're going to have to do some rate increase because the cost of chemicals and everything goes up, but how do we get ahead of the curve without doing 12 or 15% down the road? If you start out with 2 or 3 or 4 cents as a utility district or a flat fee, we could actually get ahead of the curve and not have to kill anybody in utility bills if we do it early and start putting that aside. But it's either pay now or pay later. Everybody told us they'd rather pay a little up front, little by little, than a big jump. We heard that over and over again when we made the big jump.
And I will say, in dealing with the grant down in the town, to get that grant, it was required that a percentage be added to the bill each month, and that goes to capital improvements. And their idea is, we do not want you back where you are now. You have got to have a savings for future improvements and replacements. Mm-hmm. Right. And that way, you're preparing for the future, because we know these things eventually are going to wear out, and then whoever's sitting in our seats 50 years from now isn't looking at a huge loan.
But even Caroline Pines said they'd rather pay that up front. And we're doing that, but we should do, if we did that to all the utility customers, you could save them the rate increases down the road that are going to be big, because you're going to get to 90 days or to get to some sort of utility debt service fund so that you're paying for capital out of utility fund, we're going to have to do something other than just user fees. And I think that's where, if we look at this, and we look at what a fee could be, or what percentage it would be, or how many cents it would be, and start early, start next year.
Keep in mind, the capital asset fee was started 4 years ago. It's now $3.15 for someone who has water and sewer. That's what we were growing at, that 11%, or in the first case, 5% per year. So it's $3.15 per month per bill. So it's 11% on a pretty small number. But that's only producing about $6,000 a year. So it's not a big number.
Madam Chair, could I ask?
And again, it's because of the number of users.
Yes, Mr. Thomas,
Mr.
thank you
Siebel,
for asking.
Could I ask you a quick question? If we have, because the talk is more users or higher fees for the rest of the users. So if I have a 100-unit, 55 and over facility, is that 100 connections or is that one connection?
Depends on how the builder builds their facilities. We allow them to install a larger meter on let's take a townhouse. Your townhouses could have 4 to 6 different units in it. And it depends on how the developer wants to do it. It could have, each one could have an individual meter, or they could have one meter for the entire complex for those 5 to 6 townhouses. So we charge a larger debt service fee. It also charges a larger base fee based on the size of the meter. So there is a slight savings if you were to do 5 meters compared to one larger meter. There's a small savings.
Savings if you do the five
Individual.
meters. Okay, I was just thinking, because we have projects like this that are coming up, is it better for the county to recommend us 1 meter per unit or 1 big meter? And that's kind of what we need to figure out.
We'd have to change our design standards, which is easy to do, but it depends. If you look at a commercial one that would put in an 1.5 meter, they pay $6.30 for water debt service and $12.60 compared to $1.05 and $2.10. So they're paying additional for debt service. They also pay a different base fee. So $17.02 is your current water rate. If you had an 1.5 meter, you pay $76.68. That's just for water prior to any usage. So there is an additional fee that it grows as the meters get bigger.
But that doesn't solve my debt service problem. Those numbers are meaningless. What I'm looking for is how do we build a capital fund that we've not had since I've come to the board, and we're spending $2.2 million out of the general fund for utilities from everybody else, and we've got to find a way to claw our way back. What Caroline Pines agreed to solves a lot of problems if we did that with all the users and started building a fund. I don't know the best way to do it, and I think that's what we need to look for.
But you're also not counting the amount of revenue that we're getting from all of those users.
It doesn't matter because
Well, it does matter
because it's $2.2 million every year and it's nonstop. And when you look at Bowling Green and what's closed,
That's on Bowling Green.
It doesn't matter.
No,
Brick and mortar's going backwards.
The reality is we have a lot of users in the Carmel Church area, which is where most of the utility system is. The higher your rates become, the harder it's going to be for those businesses to become viable, which means we'll lose more money.
But everybody can't keep subsidizing.
But they're subsidizing the rest of the county. That's what you don't understand.
But the consumption there has gone backwards. The truck traffic's down 50%, so the revenue's down 50%. All I'm saying is that is going to be a devolving situation. We've got to figure this out now.
That's the balance we have to make. We can't just say, let's raise the rates 10% a year, because we're going to A, kill all the businesses, and B, kill all the residents who can't afford it.
And that's why I'm saying, if we look at like what Caroline Pines is paying the fee for capital projects, that they know upfront what that's going to be, and you can keep it small if you start early. If we wait too long, we're going to be at a 10 and 12% rate increase if we wait till 2024.
Caroline Pines is a totally different situation. That was an emergency situation that the board did because it wanted to help citizens. It's not apples to apples. This is
But our apples to apples, we built a wastewater treatment plant.
Caroline Pines is not a revenue generating system. This system is a revenue generating system based on the amount of business it is.
But it's not generating revenue. We're paying $2.2 million a year out of the capital.
Can you get us for our next meeting the amount of revenue we get from Carmel Church? You'd have to work with the Commissioner of Revenue, but it's easily $10 million in revenue, and we're talking about that's everything that comes into the county, and now we're going to distract. There is something, and I'm not an economist, but there's something called the law of diminishing returns. The higher we make these rates, the more businesses we're going to lose, and the more of that $10 million is going to come down.
But when you start capital projects and you start $2 or $3 million that you're going to have to go borrow, that's going to come out of the general fund that you're already spending $2.2 million a year out of, the diminishing returns are already there.
But we need to rethink about this $120 million Rappahannock situation.
We haven't even.
But that's in there. That's the $900,000 of what he showed. That's in there. That was the money he wanted to borrow.
Is the Rappahannock project in this at all?
One at a time, please.
The recommended project being
just a permit.
Yeah, which is how much?
Another 800 and some thousand
Right.
this
We're
year.
borrowing 1.2, 800 is for the permit. So
All right, abandon it, and then you'll have no place to go in your water rates when they tell us you can't take any more out of the ground.
That's what we need to discuss, because we're not talking about, as a board, we're not talking about buying water from other localities, which have been private discussions on the staff level.
Yeah, but we've got to pay to put the infrastructure in for that, and we know from one locality to be over $6
we
million.
don't- But see, we're trying to make a decision based on purely a financial plan. Life is not always just financial plans in one dimension. Nowhere in this financial plan does it say this is an alternative. The financial plan says we're going to borrow 1.2 million. 2/3 of that is for something that may never happen.
Joe, we know how many developable lots are left in the subdivisions, correct?
Yes, Mr. Fincham has provided that previously.
And roughly, do you know how many that is?
Mrs. Seal, it depends on the number, the projects that you include in that list.
What we have approved and what's left to build. We know what's approved, and we know how many they were approved to build and what they're actually able to build without opening up other sections.
Oh, without opening up other
Without
sections?
any other sections open, because we know the cost of the lot far exceeds what they can sell it for.
I believe that number was 124 total the last time I checked.
7 left in Pendleton.
And
There's
again,
40-ish in South River, and there's a few other lots here and there. But in terms of currently platted sections, available lots, my recollection is it was, as of a couple of months ago, around 100, 120.
Okay, so the max over the next 4 years, if you evenly divide those, is 24.
A couple of projects are working on bringing new sections online, but you're probably looking at late this year, if you're lucky, more likely next year before those lots. And so with that number, you're looking at another 100 lots being available.
and didn't we just lower the availability fees and the price of all of those? So, see, and that's what I'm saying. We're looking at a very complex problem, but we only decide to take a piece of it and say, okay, if we raise the rates here, we just lowered the connection fee.
And that's what I'm saying is that we're playing with something, we're squeezing the balloon in different places, and we're not making anything any better.
But
I'm saying,
but we're not looking at the whole picture.
But we don't
I'm
look
going to say
long-term.
something that's a surprise to you. I think you're right in the sense of what we have to do long-term financially.
Early.
No, I just said what I said was right. What I also believe is...
I don't agree with that.
No, we have to do something to cover our long-term debt. I agree with you there. What I'm saying is that is not the only piece of our decision-making we need to use. We also, and you just said, abandon, if we abandon the Rappahannock intake, that's $800,000 less we have to borrow. Not that we're going to do it, but we don't have all the other factors. We're making a decision in a vacuum.
We're looking at the last 8 years of the financial situation that hasn't gotten any better since I griped about building the new wastewater treatment plant. If we kick the can down the road like we've done,
which is a benefit
it may
now.
be a benefit, but if we kick the can down the road, we're going to have less and less cash. We've got to start looking now at something small that people can afford, and start early in
And
this
that's
process.
exactly You complained about building the wastewater treatment plant 8 years ago.
Yep.
And now it's a benefit to us. He said it was state of the art. We got something that's better than anybody else. We can now handle business expansion.
All right, I'm going to end this
general fund.
conversation to give somebody else on the board a chance to speak, please. Mr. Forehand.
The way I see it, we did lower it for residential purposes. We didn't lower it for commercial. And I've actually caught a little bit of flack from folks that are actually building commercial right now. Probably going to set 15 meters in the next within the next 6 months, or have already. And they're like, what about us? Don't you want us to come? Don't you want me to keep building? But yet you're not doing anything to help the business side of it, which helps us in other ways as well. So that's one aspect for us to look at. The way I see this is that right now our density, I mean, we built this fairly large system, but our density just is, we're not dense. If we add 1,000 units to our existing structure without having to have all this capital outlay, then our numbers are automatically going to be substantially better. And that would mean that we facilitate development inside our current footprint, which I think is part of the plan already. And maybe our lowering of connection fees will help that. I know there's some folks that are doing it, but we could do it in Dawn. We could change our zoning for those where that system is, or where our other systems are. If we want to change our densities, instead of 10 acres, make it 7 acres or 5 acres, or from 20 to 10, that's an option as well.
They don't call them utilities.
Well, the new.
Because you can't just say, let's raise prices.
Oh, but I like a little fee now versus a big fee later.
And that's fine, but the point again is, we have so many, this is like a Rubik's Cube.
Fine, so
Yes.
let's decide then to finish up the presentation, see whoever else has comments, and perhaps what we need is a work session, because it's something, as you said, needs lots of pieces to put together, and we don't want to be here until midnight, and I don't want to keep the staff here until midnight, and we're not going to make a decision tonight. So, any more information you would like to share with us?
I would, Madam Chair, if I could. So what I want to point out that, because again, this isn't a recommendation. What I was trying to give the board is a sense of here's what happens at 3%, and then here's the other side of it at 9%. And what you get with 9%, and to Mr. Seeley's point, if you do nothing, you're never going to go anywhere. So my suggestion out of anything is to at least go do something. I don't know what the right number is. That's obviously where you guys have to come in. But if you start putting money aside, it does compound, and it'll get. And if you don't, then you just get further behind. But let's see if I can use this pointer. If you look on your pages, you'll see this tan box right here. It says capital outlay. That's part of that 9%. You can see it growing, the compounding. By the 5th year, we've got roughly $350,000. This is each year, so that these numbers, if you add them up, that's money that can be used for capital. Part of that money is coming out of this. So like in 2020, this million. Let's see if I can say this number right. That $162,000. Excuse me, $162,000. Half of it's going right here. The other half's going to fund balance. So we've built the fund balance up to the 90 days. By the time we get into 2024, there's $1.4 million in the bank. At the same time, we've got basically this $1.4 million that's built up. So by year 6, which of course is not on the page, we're at 90 days. We don't have to add any more to fund balance. And we've got basically $1.2 million per year now coming into the bottom line that can either go to capital or it can be reducing the fund balance transfer. The general fund transfer, excuse me. So again, 9% may not be the right number. We're not recommending it, the 9 and the 11, but somewhere in between is got to be a number to start thinking about, to start being able to have some growth on revenue side and to put that away and be able to do some capital updates as needed. But I think to the point of the system aging, that's where you've got to get some engineers in here. I know the guy was in here earlier from Dewberry talking about the next generation of new stuff. But you got to have somebody that's looking at the old stuff and figuring out where do we start putting that into CIP in terms of having to repair and replace some of the existing pipes that are now getting old.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I will state that I know it sounds like a terrible increase, and I agree that the sooner we start, the less we have to do drastically in the future. But I will say this simply because it happened to my bill. Water is a necessity. We all have to have it. We're lucky in this country that we can provide good quality water to our citizens. Town of Port Royal has a low income percentage of households at, I believe it was like 68% when we applied for our grant. They realized that to get decent water, their bills were going to go up. We went from $30 for 4,000 gallons to 35 to 40, 45. It's probably going to go up. You got a certain amount that's going into capital improvements. They know they're not going to have to face this again if something breaks down. The rate's not going to go up for that. It may go up in the future for chemicals and employees, but at least they know they're going to have a savings in the bank so that their children aren't going to have to flip the whole bill for the next pipe that breaks or the next pump that breaks. So it's just a necessity. We all need shelter, we need water, and we've got to have the funds to produce it. We need to do it logically, we need to do it as compassionately and wisely as we can. And I'm not going to give the businesses a big break. I love them being here, but they couldn't be here if we can't provide the water for them. So we've got to do that balancing act that government does all the time and try to remember everybody. And we're not going to cover that tonight, so I would like some options on work sessions so that we can come up with a plan dealing with this, if the board is in agreement. Does that sound like a plan? Mr. Cully, you got the calendar?
Madam Chair, I just want to point out that, I won't go through it, but Dawn is in here as well, in one of the back tabs.
Okay.
And then
We'll go through that.
in the appendix, we also have, we just put the base case, and we can always, once you have decided on a number, we can come back. We have the base case showing what the average user bill would be at that 3% increase in the 5% on the asset
Great,
fee.
that'd be helpful, thank you.
So that's in the appendix. Tab B is the general, is based the utility systems, not Dawn.
Now, Madam Chair,
Dawn's behind tab
if I
7.
can, when you decide to set the scope of the work session, it should include all the options we've discussed this evening, such as purchasing water. Mr. Rogers mentioned that Loudoun County bought water from Fairfax for years, and they were a lot more affluent than we are. So if they were buying water, maybe we should, look at that. I know we're discussing that with our neighbors. So that's one of the things we can talk about and decide whether it was a good idea to lower fees for connections.
For commercial connection.
Well, period.
Right, we already did it for residential. All right, very good. All right, we have some dates that look good for anyone. We're at the 9th. We have an event on the 30th of this month. We do not have a board meeting on the 23rd, correct?
I'm out of town on the 23rd, 22nd, 23rd, 24th. Yeah, I've got to leave on the 22nd, I just don't know when.
Isn't it going to take a while for, it's going to take a while for staff to put all this stuff together. I don't think,
You want to look?
Yeah. Just talking about the purchasing of water stuff, that's going to take, I don't think they're going to be able to get that together in 2 weeks.
Our engineers did that 3 years ago and came up with an analysis that we presented during the work session that we've got readily available. Baker and Associates presented that and looked at both of our neighbors, gave us estimated quantities and cost of what it would cost for availability fee as well as cost of extending the lines. So we've got that readily
So
available.
that could be updated fairly easily.
I was going to say, you believe
It's
that
as-
3-year-old data is
It's
good?
about as up to date as it can be without having discussions with the political wills of the adjacent localities.
Okay, great, thank you, Mr. Sheba. All right, so not
23rd.
this month, that takes us to November.
23rd.
We have a board meeting on the 13th. You want to try to go for the 6th? No? No? No, 15th is Thursday. Oh, it's in my book on Tuesday. Okay. So our Board of Supervisors meeting in November is on the 15th, not the 13th. I just figured we were going to rush back. Okay. How about November the 6th?
Is that election day?
Election day?
No. Yeah, no.
Can't do that then. 8th?
I'm out of town on the 8th. I can do the 7th.
7th?
Wednesday, November 7th.
Wednesday work for you all?
Fine with me.
Mr.
I can do the
Thomas?
7th.
November 7th look good for you, Mr. Underwood? Yes. All right, November 7th, 6 o'clock or earlier? Okay.
6 is fine.
All right, let's have a work session then to discuss water options and future plans on November the 7th at 6 and rates.
At the EOC, we're going to have to
The
adjourn this
EOC.
meeting to that,
Okay.
because we don't meet again.
Recess. Yeah, but nobody's here, nobody's there that month. I mean, the only other time unless you would do it Friday. Nobody wants to do it Friday. So, 7th works, okay. All right. That sounds like a plan then. Thank you very much for your report. That takes us to number 9. All right, this is the discussion for the Virginia Department of Criminal Justice School Resource Officer Grant.
Yeah, this one, the sheriff's office applied for a grant in the spring after we had completed the budget and funded 3 additional resource officers, and did receive another resource officer. It's a year grant, but it does not allow for the supplant what we've already started, so it'd be an additional resource officer for the Diversified Learning Center.
Didn't the school say that they didn't want more than 2? We did 3. I'm just kind of in a quandary now because we'd actually had 2 in the budget. The sheriff's office said they wanted 3. We went with 3, and now we're going to go to 4.
I think they asked for 4.
They asked for 4 and then they cut it down to 3.
We did ask for 4, and you only approved 3.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes, sir.
Because I've heard the number now that we want 5. I've heard from different sources that we want 1 for every school, we want 1 for the CDLC, and we want 1 roving. Is that true? Yes or no? I mean, just simply yes or no. I mean, it's a yes/no question.
It's not a roving patrol. What it is you have 5 employees, and then you have 1 supervisor supervising those 5 employees, the span of control. So Chris Hall is the sergeant over top of the SROs, and his span of control would be supervising those deputies.
So in other words, you want 2 more?
No, we just want this grant, and that's it. So, I mean...
So what you're saying is if you got this grant, then you would not ask next year's budget for
No.
a supervisor?
I have not heard any
SROs?
plans for any additional SROs.
Okay.
In the last board meeting, y'all agreed to approve 3, which very graciously
Right.
did that, and that was wonderful. CDLC is the person in Bowling Green kind of goes back and forth between the CDLC and Bowling Green.
So what I was hearing is you actually wanted 2 more.
Not that I'm aware of. I haven't
Okay.
heard that anywhere at
Okay.
all.
And then
Okay.
Floyd actually said that he wanted us to apply for grants when we were in that work session.
Right,
and-
right.
And we did. and
Okay.
We didn't
I just want to
expect get-
clarify, I just want to
Yes.
clarify, we're talking about one, not two.
I have not heard that whatsoever.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, can
Scott, can I ask you?
Yes.
This grant, it just covers this
One
1 year?
1 year.
And then this person,
Could not have a job next year.
okay.
That's correct.
Madam Chair, could I ask Mr. Cully?
Mr. Thomas?
Mr. Cully, in your summary, it said, could not replace funds already allocated, but in the grant, it says for an elementary school SRO. Well, if we've already funded the elementary schools, how do we manage to keep in context with the grant? And
Because I think because they're moving, they could say they were moving the one that's elementary school to another school. We're not going to fund the one at the elementary school with the grant money. Mainly means we got to hire somebody. If we currently have one in the high school, the middle school, and 3 elementary schools, this grant's got to fund another SRO somewhere.
now, in this grant process, to one last one, Madam Chair, there was also a grant for school security officers. That was part of, I'm not finished, that was part of the grant application process. You aware of that, Mr.?
No, I'm
Major
not.
Manager?
I was not aware of that. I did not write the grant, I'm sorry.
Okay, in the grant award, I read that we all got, school security officers were part of grants. And as Mr. Cully was saying, they're appointed by the school board, so I don't know if we want to talk to the school board about applying for a school security officer grant also, which may supplement some of the things we're doing here now.
Mr. Underwood, did you want to speak? No, oh.
You want to
sorry.
say you did that where?
I asked about that earlier, about SSOs, when we first started talking about resource officers, and we let it die, but many school systems are using SSOs. Yeah, but they're using them. I'm saying we should look at all options again, not just,
I think the big hangup, I'm sorry,
No, go ahead, Mr.
the big hangup was the SSOs can't be armed.
that's not true. That's not true.
Well, not in Virginia.
Yes, they just changed.
Did they just change the law?
Yep.
Okay, I stand corrected.
Yeah, when we looked into it, they could not be, and they have to be school employees. The county
Right.
cannot hire them.
I also received an email from Delegate Ranson stating that Caroline County Schools have been awarded $100,000 for security equipment. Middle school, high school, and 2 elementary schools. So that's just nice to know. That's not eyes on the ground, though.
But that's, I don't know how much we've spent in the past few years on security itself, just for the schools. So,
Right.
we've already secured the front doors, the back doors, and everything else. So what's this extra money going to be used for?
No, it's for security, it's for equipment.
Can
locks,
it pay
cameras,
for a
that type of
resource
thing.
officer out of that?
I haven't seen the regulations on the grant. She just sent me a notice saying that 4 or 5 counties had gotten grant money, and Caroline got $100,000.
It's like fixing the bathroom over at the old Bowling Green School. We've provided money to fix it 3 times.
So we'll see what they do with that, but it goes to the school board, not to us. I'm sorry, Scott, we
No,
left you hanging
you're
out
fine,
there.
Madam Chairman. Whatever.
Will you be taking with this person, if we match the funds on this grant, would this person be someone already employed, or?
Yes,
so-
ma'am.
All right, so it could be just for this year, and?
We're trying to stick by the rule that the officer at least has to have 2 years of road experience in order to be transferred into the school.
Okay.
Yes,
But
ma'am.
you have somebody already on staff that could do this, so
Yes,
this would
ma'am.
be supplementing his salary.
That's correct.
Yeah, but you'd have to add somebody else somewhere else.
That is also correct.
There's a new person's got to come. They may not go into school, but you can't
So we've got to
supplant.
backfill that
You
position.
cannot take this money and not add a employee.
You cannot you have to backfill the position.
Right.
Or you're supplanting the grant, and then
Correct.
you can't do that. No, that's big time trouble.
That's figured, maybe he had somebody part-time who's going to put in there, since it's just a 9-month position. All right, discussion on this?
So are we saying, so this is forever, or is this just for 1 year, I guess is my question.
The grant's just, the supplemental on the grant for the salary is just for 1 year.
No,
The
they've
county
already
has a
got
grant
something.
policy.
Now, a lot of the grants do allow you to apply again the next year, so, and we may not get it. We were one of 10, I think, that got a grant.
Mr. Sealy, the county has a grant policy that your position goes as long as the grant goes. That's the policy.
Well,
I was just telling
So
you.
we're talking a
That's-
matching
that's fine.
amount of $32,770 from the state and $17,230 from the county.
Yes. Madam Chair, I'd like to go
Yes.
ahead and make the motion that we approve the grant and the matching funds for the CDLC.
Well, I don't know that you can put it at the CDLC, it's for an
Or
elementary
for
school.
For school. Just say school.
for a school, for the school resource officer, an additional school resource officer. That will cover it.
For 1 year.
You're appropriating that match money from the fund balance.
Yes.
It needs
Yes,
to be in your motion.
yes, and I'm, just add that to the motion, that it's coming from the fund balance.
Appropriated from the fund balance.
Is this a fiscal year? Are we stopping at the end of the calendar year, at school year? How does this go?
Grant award's like on the federal grant award. It's October 1 to September 30th, which is on the federal calendar, so it's going to cross across our budget.
Makes it clean.
Yeah, it keeps it clean. It's probably, in that it's on the federal calendar, that's where the state must have gotten it. And we'll have to roll the match, so whatever we use and don't use will end up being rolled into next year's budget to finish up July, August, and September.
Is that person available now?
Yes, sir. We've had several requests from different officers to transfer over.
Oh, okay.
So Major Mosier, they will be there full-time.
Yes, that's correct.
I have heard good things from the elementary schools that they are there. and
I as
appreciate-
well.
I
That's-
appreciate that, so let's just want
Thank
to make
you.
sure that they're, because sometimes in other localities, the officers are not where they're supposed to be, and it's kind of frustrating when you feel like, hey, they're supposed to be here and they're not.
I totally agree.
Okay.
I
Yes, sir.
assume this person will be someone that will fill in when someone has to go to court or has a sick day or vacation.
They can't be.
That person will be assigned to an elementary school, and then Sergeant Hall will be the fill-in.
He'll be the fill-in if
So the
somebody
CDLC
needs-
can be covered by Bowling Green, while, let's say that somebody's away from the high school because of court, then Sergeant Hall can fill in there, or if it's Lewis and Clark, he can fill in there, or he can fill in wherever he's needed. And,
That'll
also,
give the schools time to use their $100,000 security grant in case you don't get the grant for another officer next year.
right, right, yeah.
We can do it that
Honestly,
way.
I was surprised we got it, I really was. Since y'all
I
made
have-
such a commitment to the schools, I was surprised that we got that grant.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I have a question.
Oh,
Mr.
Mr.
Moyer.
Ford.
Yes, sir.
Just wanted to provide a comment. Dropped the kids off once or twice a week the last few weeks, and deputy parks out front. It's easy to see it. It's great, but it's also easy to see when he's not there. And half the time I've gone to drop him off, he hasn't been there. There's no car there. Maybe he's there, but there's no car there. So
Gotcha.
full-time, it's full-time,
That is correct.
or is it?
No, it's full-time, but with a full-time employee, since we don't have the ability to backfill at this point until we get this grant, then when he's sick or he's in court, and that particular officer at the school that your kids go to has been sick a number of days. So
Let me ask you this, because you say in court, does that mean that they're in court for some other domestic thing they've done during the weekend or at night when they're not at the school?
Generally, they're at the school full-time, so they should be there for court issues in reference to the school. But there is a possibility if they handle some other type of call, they may be in the court for another type of call.
But are they traditionally handling other types of call during the school year? Are they working weekends and nights?
Absolutely not. They work Monday through Friday, just like the school staff does.
Now, when you say backfill, if that officer has to go to court or something, do you have someone at the school while they...
If we get this grant, we will. Yes.
And if it's just one?
Yeah, and if two of them are in court, one school will be covered and one may not.
Wait, you can't cover all the schools and have someone in court.
That's correct.
So, but you just said...
Well, I said earlier that the CDLC would be the one that we'd probably pull from because it's a limited amount of kids over there, and Bowling Green would be covering the CDLC while the other officer, which is going to be Sergeant Hall, I assume, if the sheriff chooses him to be that backfill person.
Okay, it didn't sound like that when you're saying it, because
Yeah.
you have one per school.
Right, I gave you
even
half
with the grant.
half the answer that time. but
Okay,
I gave
okay.
the full answer the first time.
Okay, thank
Yes,
you,
sir.
sir.
I'm sorry.
Give us, the resource officers will be, we have 5 right now, we're going to go to 6, right?
We have 4.
Okay, we have 4. We're going to 5. We have 6 schools.
Wait a minute, hold on. We've got the high school, middle school, Lewis and Clark, Madison, Bowling Green. We have 5, and then we're going to 6, which would include the CDLC. And then, of course, the 6th one, you're correct, yeah. We had 2, we added 3, which gave us 5. The grant will be 6.
So we have 10% of the road deputies in the schools. You have 50-something road deputies. We have 10% of that number in the schools, just to be clear.
That sounds accurate to me.
Okay.
But that's probably the best well-spent money, though, that the sheriff's office...
Surprisingly how busy that the school resources are in the elementary school. It is surprisingly how busy they are.
All right, I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
I have a motion. I have a second. Further discussion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? So moved.
We're getting there.
Can't we just do the library and be done?
Aren't you all glad it was a short meeting?
Yeah. It's me. I mean, based on what I've seen, we have to do this. So 1 and 2, if you just want to differentiate between what 1 and 2 are on the back page, that would be real helpful. Because this is just, we've all agreed to take on the library system. We've done all the work to get it here.
So
You
we're
got it,
increasing it. Go ahead.
Mr. Parton, I know that they have money. We're going to use their one-time money for salaries, and then we're going to pick up the rest of the cost sometime next year. Is that true?
That's correct. We would hope within 2 to 3 years to recover approximately 40% of the cost from
Because,
the...
yeah, I saw that we would get that. So the 1 and 2 is just to approve using the one-time money in salaries, and then 2 is applying to the state for the 40% match.
The second is to simply appropriate the money. It's in the library donation fund now. Appropriate the 68 for the use that we're proposing.
So we need 2 motions, Mr. Colley? Because should I make the appropriations motion first, since that's probably got to happen before we pay it? Because I'll make a motion, we appropriate $68,426.63 in remaining revenue from the operation of the library by Caroline Library, Inc. towards the cost of placing library employees on the county pay plan.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Yeah, how many employees do we have in the library?
There's a bunch.
40?
Gotta make it work.
14?
Yes,
About
please.
18,
I was thinking
the
14.
majority of which are part-time branch.
How many full-time?
There's 4.
We have the library director and then the assistant director who's also the branch manager here in Bowling Green, and then the 2 branch managers at Dawn and Lady Smith.
And they were not put in the Springstead study?
They weren't employees of the county at the time.
We just took on the library 1 July.
Right. It was the same time the Springstead study went into effect, though, right?
Went effective September.
Went September last year and was
The
actually
research
done
was
the year
done-
prior to that.
Yeah, right. Okay.
Considerably earlier than that.
Yeah.
Okay. I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? So moved.
Madam Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to approve the supplemental appropriation of $52,491 to the fiscal year 2019 library budget for personnel expenses associated with the placing library employees on the county plan.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? So moved.
Thank you.
Thank you. I did it. Oh, yep. That's right. We added that. 10A. Hold on, guys. We got 10A, the parking at Dawn.
You want to do the 15?
Yeah, just do the 15 after, not the, or the 20. I thought it was the 20.
No, 15. 20 was.
15, yeah. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, the 15 is on the land we already have an easement to go off of our property and get an easement and build a gravel parking lot. We anticipate another 3,000, what did Joey have? 3,500 in here due to the gravel and the fabric you'd have to put down to get that done. But we did receive a comment from the registrar today, and they're not recommending anything, they're just making us aware that there had been a complaint about parking.
Madam Chairman,
Mr. Underwood.
I'd make a recommendation that we only add the 15 additional parking spaces at the polling place for Reedy Church.
Dawn Library.
Dawn Library polling place.
Yeah, I know.
Dawn Library. What's that?
I have
No.
a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? So moved. You want to discuss adding more?
We just voted. He voted nay.
Oh, okay. All right.
That's more than I got in Bowling Green. And it's more than you got at Upper Caroline. Okay. We voted. You want a roll call vote, Madam Chair?
Roll call. No. Okay, that's all right. I'm sorry, I was moving too fast. Hit that button next time. If we could always bring it back, we would have to get permission to add more parking lots anyhow for the property owner, so. All right, I have capital project update. Anything, Mr. Kelly?
I don't think we've changed any of the project numbers. We provided, Curtis provided a capital project update for your review and informational calendar. On the 13th, we have Sparta Day, and we have the employee picnic at 12 at the county park. That's this week. We also have, and I just got it, it was an open house on the Joe Humble Art Exhibit, which had been scheduled for the last hurricane on September 15th. Now
Just
it's
in time for this one.
October 13th. So I got
it's the
this in an
same
email
time.
at noon to 3. And his family will be present during the open house to discuss his artwork and his career. So I did want, that's a historical society. So I just want to make everybody aware that that's also this Saturday, because we got that after we did this calendar. Bowling Green Harvest Festival is the 20th. Frog Level Festival is the 27th, along with the Special Olympic Soccer Tournament that's at the park on the 27th. And then note a change, we normally would have had this on the 23rd, but the RACSB Legislative Get-Together is the 30th. Correct. He came in today. And that would be at the center across from the high school, and that would probably be at 6 o'clock, 6 or 6:30. We'll confirm that in an email to you.
Mr. Keller, we have the Take Your Legislator to Work Day early November.
We just got that. The
That's
9th.
the 9th.
We just got that invite today. So that's Friday the 9th. We have our work session the 7th. Is take your legislator to the schools. You should have got an invite to ride around on a school bus and tour all the schools with it. I didn't. I can't remember where I was. He did. I was out of town or somewhere for that. Annual VACO conference starting on the 10th through the 13th. And note that the board meeting is the 15th, Thursday the 15th. And then we head into Thanksgiving, and I'll be in Florida. Keep that quiet. 15th, correct. 15th, Thursday the 15th.
Because we have the conference.
And we had already moved it when we set our board meeting schedule. It's on the annual calendar, so, and there's not a second meeting in November as well.
The 12th should be the Veterans Day ceremony.
Yes.
It'll be the 5th year of the Korean War ceremony, and I think they're going to ask Mr. Whiteman if he'll wear his dress blues again, to celebrate the 5th year. So.
And it's on 12th, not the 11th?
It should be, the 11th is Sunday.
I know that.
It should be the 12th, because that's when the federal government will make that holiday.
Right. And they know I'm going to be out of town, so I haven't heard anything.
The Korean War 5th year anniversary. Since that's what I thought. Now, they haven't sent it out, but that is Monday.
Do you know the time? All right. Would you ask them if they could get it to Mr. Cully so he can get the word out, since we'll be at the conference? I won't be able to attend, and I will miss everyone.
Mr. Whiteman was instrumental in making it happen. That and the fact we didn't ask VDOT for the sign.
All right, that takes us down to closing comments. Mr. Thomas? Any closing comments? Oh, sorry. Okay. Mr. Black?
No, Madam Chairman, no.
One thing I forgot in opening board comments, Bowling Green Fire is doing their annual Hunters event at Town Hall on this Saturday, the 13th at 5:30, I believe.
Who is that?
Bowling Green Fire at Town Hall.
Oh.
It's their annual event.
The 13th is a busy day.
No kidding.
Gracious goodness. Okay. Mr. Underwood? Mr. Forehand?
No, ma'am.
All right.
Mr. Fincham's got something.
Oh,
Mr. Finch.
Madam Chair, I do have one comment. Earlier this evening, we talked about the appointment to the Board of Building Code Appeals, and that should be Mr. Bob Harry is the person who is on the board. Ms. Eddie Terrell is on the Board of Zoning Appeals. So I just have them backwards, so I need to
Reverse that.
And ask the.
If you'll make a motion, I'll gladly second to reverse and add Mr. Harry.
So, Madam Chair, if you don't mind, I'd like to make a motion that we, I guess we want to
Reverse.
We want to reverse
Actually, we could, I'll rescind my first motion if you'll rescind your second.
Okay.
I'll make a new motion to appoint Mr. Craig Woodward and Mr. Bob Harry to the board of, is it zoning appeals?
Building
Building
code.
Building appeals.
Building Code Board of Appeals.
Right. I'll second.
All right, I have did you you removed your first motion, right?
Correct.
All right. I have a new motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you for catching that, guys. Mr. Forehand, closing comments? All right. I thank everybody for being here. Remember, we will be out of town from the 10th to the 13th, but this hall will hold it down every day. Oh, and we need a motion to recess to
Until the
November 7th.
7th. I make a
6 o'clock.
motion that we recess to the EOC, 6 o'clock on the 7th of November.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? So moved. Thank you. I will see you all on the 7th.
I'll be here this